Welcome back to the quiet apothecary. Take a slow breath, settle into where you are, and let the shoulders soften a little. There is no hurry tonight, and nothing here that asks anything of you. Tonight we travel across the ocean and back through the centuries to a great city of canals and temples in the Valley of Mexico, to a city that was once the largest and the brightest and the most carefully tended place in all of that wide green country. And we are going to walk slowly through the strange and gentle and sometimes terrible medicine of its healers by the light of a single low candle, in no hurry at all. Let the picture come to you slowly, the way a thing seen at dusk comes slowly into shape. There is a wide lake in a high valley, ringed all around by mountains, and on two of those mountains there is snow, even though the valley itself is warm. In the middle of the lake there is an island, and on the island there is a city, and the city is laced through with water, so that the streets are not all streets, but a half of them canals, and the people move through their city as much by canoe as by foot. The city is called Tenochtitlan, which is an old word that means the place of the prickly pear cactus upon the stone, and it is the heart of the people we now call the Aztecs, though they called themselves the Mexica, and it is the year, let us say, just before the strangers came from across the sea, when the city was still whole and still itself, and still at the height of its long quiet morning. It is the evening of a market day. The great square has emptied of its sellers, the canoes that brought the flowers, and the fish and the maize and the bundles of dried herbs have slipped back along the canals toward the edges of the lake, and the light over the water has turned to the soft color of old copper. There are causeways, long straight raised roads of packed earth and stone, that run out from the island to the shore in 3 directions, and along the causeways the last travelers are coming home before dark. The temples stand high above the rooftops, and on the very tallest of them a thin grey thread of incense smoke rises straight up into the still air, for the priests are burning copal, the pale gold resin of a desert tree, as they do at the close of every day, and the smell of it drifts down over the whole city, sweet and dry, and a little like the inside of an old church. Now let the eye come down from the temples, down past the painted walls and the flat white roofs, down to the smaller houses along the smaller canals, and find one house in particular. It is a low house of plastered adobe, with a flat roof and a small inner courtyard, and in the courtyard there are plants growing in careful rows and in painted clay pots, and you would know, if you could see them closely, that not one of those plants is there by accident. Every one of them is there to be used. For this is the house of a healer, and in the language of the city such a healer is called a tisset, and it is the tissetal whose long, slow knowledge we are going to follow tonight. I am only an old apothecary in a far country, and I never walked those causeways, and I never tasted the bitter green medicines of the lake city with my own tongue. But the healers of that city left a trace of themselves behind, a faint and precious trace, and I have spent a great many long evenings bent over what they left, and tonight I will read it to you slowly, the way one friend reads to another by candlelight when the day is done, and there is nothing left to do but rest. What they left is a book. Not a book as you and I would know it at first, but a thing they made later, after the strangers came, when a small number of their wise men sat down in a school by the lake, and tried to write down, before it was lost, some part of what their healers knew. One of them, a Mexican physician whose name in the new writing was set down as Martin de la Cruz, told what he knew of the herbs and their uses. Another, a younger man named Juan Badiano, turned those words into the Latin of the newcomers. And so there came to exist a small painted book of the medicinal herbs of the people, finished in the year 1552, with its careful drawings of plants in bright mineral colors, and its quiet descriptions of what each plant was for. We call it now by many names, but you may simply think of it as the painted book of herbs, and tonight, in our imagining, it lies open on the bench before us, beside a second and far larger gathering of the old knowledge that a patient friar named Bernardino de Sahagun made from the mouths of the city's surviving elders. Between the two of them, the painted book and the friar's great compendium, we have a small lamp to hold up against the dark, and by its light we can see, dimly but truly, how the healers of the lake city tended the sick. Before we open to the first remedy, let me set the scene a little more, for these cures will mean nothing to you if you do not first understand the world the healers believed they were working in. It is a different world from ours, and a different world even from the one my own old Tudor predecessors believed in, and you must let it settle over you slowly, the way the incense settles over the city, before the cures themselves will make their strange sense. The healers of the lake city believed that a person was not one thing but a weaving together of several forces, and that sickness came when one of those forces was disturbed, or wandered, or was struck, or was stolen away. There was a force they kept in the head, a warm, bright, animating force that they connected with the sun and with one's day of birth in the sacred calendar, and they thought of it as a kind of inner heat that could be shaken loose by a fall or by a great fright, so that a frightened person might in truth lose a little of himself and grow pale and waste, until the lost part was called gently home. There was a second force they kept in the heart, the seat of memory and feeling, and the steady self, the part that made you the one you were. And there was a third force, a kind of breath or vapor they kept in the liver, which could be used for harm if a person let their anger and their envy turn it sour, so that a bitter person could, without quite meaning to, breathe a kind of sickness onto a child or onto a weaker neighbor. You need not believe any of this. You need only let it lie quietly in your mind, as the frame inside which the pictures hang. Beside these three forces there ran another idea, an idea so old and so widespread across the world that you will meet it in the medicine of nearly every people, and that is the idea of heat and cold. The healers of the lake city divided the whole world, the foods and the herbs and the illnesses and the very airs and waters, into the warm things and the cool things. And they believed that the body grew sick when it tipped too far toward one or the other, and that the cure was to bring it gently back to the middle. A fever was an excess of heat, and so it was met with cooling herbs and cooling baths. A chill, a sluggishness, a cold heaviness in the limbs was an excess of cold, and so it was met with the warming herbs, with the wild tobacco rubbed into the skin, with the hot resins, with the close steam of the bathhouse. It is, you will notice, not so very far from the old four humours of my own tradition. The warming and the cooling, and the drying and the moistening, and that is no accident. for human beings everywhere, watching the body over thousands of years, have arrived again and again at the same broad and gentle and not entirely wrong intuition that the body has a balance, and that health is the keeping of it. And there was a third frame, which was the gods. The people of the lake city lived in a world thick with the divine. There was a goddess of the flowing waters and the medicinal springs, and a goddess who governed the herbs and the love, magic and the steam baths, and there were the small gentle gods of the household and the hearth, and over them all the great and terrible powers of the sun and the rain and the night. Sickness might be the touch of a god displeased, or the consequence of a broken vow, or a punishment for a thing done wrong. And so the healing of the body was very often braided together with the healing of the spirit, with confession, with offering, with the burning of incense, with the speaking of long and formal, and very beautiful prayers over the suffering person. We will come to those prayers near the end of our evening, for they are among the most moving things the healers left behind, and they are best heard last when you are already drowsy and soft and ready to be spoken over yourself. So, that is the frame, a person made of warm forces that can wander or be struck, a world of warm things and cool things to be held in balance, and a sky full of gods who must be kept gently in mind. Hold those three lightly, and we may begin. Let me tell you first, before any single remedy, where the healer got the things she used, for the getting of them was itself a wonder. In the twin city of Tlatelolco, just to the north across a short stretch of water, there was a marketplace so vast that the strangers who later saw it wrote home in plain astonishment, saying they had seen nothing like it in all of Europe, that 60,000 people came and went in it on a busy day, that everything under the sun was bought and sold there in its own appointed quarter, each kind of thing kept neatly to its own row, and in one quarter of that great market sat the sellers of medicine. There were women and some men, sitting behind low mats spread with their wares, and on the mats were the dried roots tied in small bundles, and the seeds in little woven baskets, and the powdered barks folded in maize husk packets, and the fresh green herbs kept damp under wet cloths, and the resins, and the colored earths, and the small dried bodies of certain animals, and the bright feathers, and the polished stones that went into the cures of the spirit. A healer would walk that row slowly in the cool of the morning, choosing, smelling, breaking a leaf to test its freshness, paying with cacao beans counted out one by one, for cacao beans were money there as well as drink. And so a person might quite literally pay for medicine with chocolate. Picture that for a moment, and let it make you smile a little before you sleep, that there was once a great green city where the price of a cure for a fever was a small handful of cacao beans. Now, the healers themselves were of more than one kind, and it is worth knowing the difference, for it shaped what cures a sick person would be offered. There was the plain herb doctor, the one who knew the plants and the roots, and the simple practical mendings of the body, who set the broken bone and bound the wound, and brewed the bitter tea. And this was the ticitle in the everyday sense. Often a steady older woman who had learned from her mother, who had learned from hers. There was the midwife, a healer of her own special and honored kind, of whom we will speak when we come to the birthing room. There was the bone setter, and the one skilled with the blade. And then there were the seers and the diviners, the ones who read the cause of an illness in the casting of maize kernels, or in the measuring of the patient's forearm against the line of the fingers, the ones who took the sacred plants and went into the visions to find out which god was offended, or where the lost part of a soul had wandered. The everyday Ticitel and the seer were not enemies. They worked the two ends of the same long art, the one tending the visible body, and the other the invisible self, and a sick person in the lake city might well receive both on the same day, a cup of cooling herb, tea in the morning, and a quiet diviner casting the kernels by the fire at dusk. And there was one more thing that stood at the center of nearly all their healing, so central that we must name it now, and we will return to it many times, and that is the bath, house of steam, which they called the Temazcali, and which you may simply think of as the steam bath. It was a small low-domed building of stone and plaster, just big enough to crouch inside. With a tiny door you had to bend nearly double to pass through, and against one wall a fire was built against the outside of the stones until the wall glowed with heat, and then water was thrown against the hot wall from within, and the little room filled with thick, wet, billowing steam. The sick person crouched in the steam, sometimes alone, sometimes with the healer beside them, and was brushed and switched gently with bundles of fresh leaves, and sweated, and was washed, and came out at last loose, limbed and emptied and clean. They used it for very nearly everything, for the aches of age and the stiffness of cold, for the woman before her birth and the woman after it, for the fevers and the skin troubles and the heaviness of spirit. It was their hearth and their hospital and their quiet sanctuary all in one, and the goddess of the steam bath was honored at its little door, and we shall meet it again and again as the night goes on. Now the candle is steady, and the city is dark on its water, and the incense has long since burned down to its ash on the high temple. The painted book lies open before us at its first leaf, and so let us begin, as the healers themselves would have wished to begin, with the great trouble that came in the warm seasons and emptied the houses, the trouble they feared above almost all others, which is fever. Let us speak first of the small green herb that the people called Istorhilt, which the later botanists set down as a kind of wormwood, a cousin of the bitter silver-leaved plants that grow wild on the dry hillsides of half the world, and which was perhaps the most trusted of all the cooling fever herbs in the healer's hand. It is a low bushy plant with finely divided leaves, soft and a little downy to the touch, and when you crush a leaf between your fingers, it gives up a sharp, clean, bitter scent, the kind of scent that seems almost to cool the inside of the nose as you breathe it. The healers gathered it growing wild, and they also tended it in their courtyard rows, and they kept it dried in bundles through the seasons when it would not grow. Why did they trust it so against fever? Because of the bitterness and the coolness in the logic of their world. A fever was heat risen too high in the body, and the Istorhel was a cool and bitter and drying thing, and the cool was set against the heat, and the bitterness was thought to cut through the thickened humours and let the body settle. It was, in their reckoning, a herb that pulled the body back down toward the middle. And there was more to it than the bare theory, for the herb had been watched over many lifetimes, and the healers had simply seen, again and again, that a person burning with fever who drank the bitter green infusion of it often grew quieter and slept and woke cooler than before. How was it given? Most often as a simple infusion, which is to say the dried or fresh herb steeped in hot water, strained and drunk warm in small cups through the day. Sometimes it was given alone, and sometimes it was joined with other cooling herbs to make a stronger draught. It was used as a wash too, the cooled infusion poured over the hot body or pressed onto the brow in a soaked cloth. And it was used as a rinse for the sore mouth and the inflamed gum, swilled and spat, for its bitterness was thought to clean and to settle the heat of the flesh there as well. The dose was modest, a small cup. Repeated gently, the healer watching the patient's color and the dampness of the skin and adjusting as a careful cook adjusts a pot. And what likely happened when a feverish person of the lake city drank the bitter green tea of Iztoyatl. Some of it, we may fairly say, was the simple good of any warm drink given gently to a sick and frightened person who is being watched over by someone who knows what they are doing. The warmth, the rest, the fluid taken in against the drying of the fever, the calm presence of the healer at the side, all of these are real medicines, and always have been. And the herb itself was not nothing. Its bitter aromatic oils are mild and real, settling to the stomach, easing the cramp, and the plant has been used for the same broad purposes by the people of that country from that day right down to our own. It did not cure the deep cause of a serious fever, of course. Nothing the healer had could do that. But it eased and it comforted, and it did, in its modest way, a portion of real good. And that is a great deal more than can be said for a number of the stranger cures we shall meet before the night is out. And the strangest of the fever cures waits a little further on, so do not settle too deeply just yet. First there is a tree to speak of, a tree whose dark seeds you already know, though you have likely never thought of it as a medicine at all. The tree is the cacao tree, the one whose seeds become the dark and bitter drink that the whole world now loves. And in the lake city the cacao was at once a money, a luxury, a sacred thing offered to the gods, and, in the hand of the healer, a medicine. We think of chocolate now as a sweet, a small indulgence at the end of a meal, but you must put that picture away entirely, for the chocolate of the lake city was a thing apart. It was bitter and dark and often cold, ground from the roasted seeds and beaten in water until it foamed, and flavored not with sugar, which they did not have, but with chili, with maize, with the small dark flowers of a sweet vine, and with the pod we now call vanilla, which grew wild in the warm forests to the south, and was traded up to the city in fragrant black bundles. The healer used the cacao chiefly against weariness and weakness, against the low grey state of a person who is recovering slowly from an illness, or who has been worn thin by a long road, or who is simply failing in strength as the old fail. In their reckoning the cacao was a warming and a strengthening thing, a drink that put heat and vigor back into a cooled and emptied body. And they gave it to the weary traveler, to the soldier worn out from the march, to the convalescent rising at last from a fever, and to the great lord who wished to keep his strength and his spirits high. The drink was prepared with care and given warm or cool, as the case required, sometimes thickened with ground maize into a kind of nourishing gruel that was as much food as medicine, sometimes left thin and bitter, and beaten high with foam, the foam being especially prized, so that the maker would pour the drink from a height from one vessel to another to raise it. And what did it do? Here, unlike with many of the cures, we can say with some confidence that it did real good, for the cacao seed holds within it the same gentle quickening substances that you and I know in our own coffee and tea and chocolate, the substances that lift the spirits a little and chase away the heaviness of fatigue and warm the sense of the self. A wary person given a cup of strong, bitter cacao would, in plain truth, feel better for it, brighter, steadier, a little lifted, and the rich seed is nourishing besides, full of the kind of good fat and substance that a depleted body needs. So the healer who reached for the cacao against weariness was reaching for something that truly worked, and the people who drank it knew that it worked, which is why it was so prized, and why a man might pay a small fortune in those same cacao beans simply to drink a cup of them ground and beaten and warmed by a skilled hand. Now let us turn to a harder and a stranger fever cure, the purge, which the healers used to drive the sickness out of the body by the lower road, and which they trusted greatly, and which to our gentler modern sense seems a hard thing to do to a person already laid low. The reasoning in their world was clear enough. If a fever was a corruption risen in the body, a heat and a fullness gathered within, then it stood to reason that the body would be helped by emptying that corruption out, and the surest and most visible way to empty the body was to give a strong purging root that would move the bowels hard and clear them. So the healer kept, among the roots in her store, certain plants of real and considerable power, roots that would set the gut working violently within an hour or two of being swallowed, and these she gave, in measured doses, to the feverish, to the bilious, to the one whose body she judged to be loaded with a sickness that wanted driving out. The purging roots of the lake city were many, and some of them were truly strong enough that a careless hand could do real harm, and the skill of the healer lay precisely in the knowing of the dose, in the matching of the strength of the root to the strength of the patient, in the watching, in the stopping at the right moment. The root was most often dried and ground and given in water or boiled into a draught, and the patient was kept warm and quiet and near to hand while it did its hard work, and afterward was given gentle gruels and warm drinks to settle and to restore. It was not a comfortable medicine, but it was given with intent and with judgment, and in a body genuinely loaded with something that wanted shifting, a spoiled stomach, a load of foul matter, an excess that the body itself was straining to be rid of. The purge could in truth bring real relief, the relief of the emptied and the lightened. Where it did harm was where it was given to a body already too weak to bear it, and the wise healers knew this and held their hands. Now I promised you the strangest of the fever cures, and here it is. And it is strange not because it is foolish, but because it reaches across worlds that we no longer let touch, the world of the burning mineral and the world of the green herb, and binds them together in a single plaster laid upon a fevered head. In the painted book there is a remedy for what is called the heat of the heart, and for the fever that mounts to the head, and among its ingredients, set down quite plainly beside the herbs and the flowers, is the green stone we call emerald ground fine, and certain other precious stones besides, the red and the bloodstone, and the rest, all crushed and worked together with the juices of cooling plants into a paste, and the paste was laid upon the brow of the fevered person, or worked into a potion and given to drink. Why a precious stone? Because the green of the emerald was, to their eye, the very color of coolness, of water, of the new young leaf, of the jade they prized above gold, and a thing so green and so cool and so precious must surely carry within it the power to cool. There is a logic there, even if it is not our logic, the old wide human logic that says the qualities a thing seems to hold, its color and its coolness to the touch, and its rarity and its beauty, are bound up with the powers it can lend. And the precious stones were the coolest and the most enduring of all green and beautiful things. And so into the fever paste they went, ground at no small cost. For these were the jewels of kings. How was it given? The stone was ground to a fine powder upon a grinding stone, which was hard and slow work, and the powder was mixed into the cooling herb, juices and the flower waters, and worked into a smooth paste. And the paste was spread upon a clean cloth and laid across the burning forehead of the sick person, to be renewed as it dried and warmed, and the cool of it, the simple physical cool of a damp plaster on a hot brow, was felt as a blessing. And sometimes a few grains of the ground stone were given in a cooling drink, on the same reasoning that the coolness and the virtue of the green jewel would pass into the overheated heart and settle it. And what did the ground emerald do? Almost certainly nothing in itself, for the body cannot take up the substance of a crushed stone in any way that would touch a fever, and the precious mineral passed through unchanged or sat inert upon the skin. But notice the company it kept. It was laid in a damp, cool plaster, and a damp, cool plaster on a hot forehead does genuinely soothe. And it was mixed with real cooling herbs, whose juices had their own mild virtue, and it was given by a healer who had judged the case, and who sat by the patient, and who renewed the plaster with care, and the whole of that gentle attention was the true medicine, while the crushed jewel was the costly and beautiful and useless heart of the ceremony. There is something almost touching in it, that a frightened family would grind up the most precious thing they owned, a green stone worth a field of maize, and lay it on the brow of a sick child, in the hope that its coolness and its beauty would call the fever down. The hope was real. The love was real. The stone did nothing. And yet I would not be quick to call the cure worthless, for a child laid in a cool, quiet room with a damp plaster on its head, and its mother near and a wise woman watching, is a child being given very nearly the best that anyone in that age could give. Let us stay a moment longer with the cooling cures, for there was a whole family of them, drawn not from stones, but from flowers, and these were gentler and lovelier, and did, I think, a little more good. The people of the lake city loved flowers as few peoples ever have, loved them past all reason, grew them in floating gardens out on the lake, wove them into garlands for the feasts, gave them as the highest of gifts, and named a great festival for them. And they believed that the sweet, cool fragrance of certain flowers carried a real healing virtue, especially against the heats and the heaviness of the body. And so among the fever remedies and the cures for a body overcome by warmth, there were flower waters, made by steeping the petals of the most fragrant blossoms in water until the water took on their scent, and these cool, perfumed waters were given to drink, and were dabbed on the temples, and were poured into the bath. One of the loveliest of these was made with the great cup-shaped flower of a magnolia tree, a heavy waxen white blossom with a deep sweet lemony scent, joined with the small fragrant flowers of a flowering shrub, and with the dark twisting flowers of a vine, and with the pods of the vanilla, all steeped together in water to make a fragrant draught that the painted book says gives strength to the body and lifts away the weariness. You can almost smell it, can you not? The cool sweet flower, water in its painted gourd, given to a person worn down by the heat, the scent of magnolia and vanilla rising off it. And you can well believe that a person sipping such a thing in a cool shaded room, breathing that sweetness, would feel the day's heaviness lift a little from them, whether by any deep virtue in the flowers or simply by the gentle pleasure of the thing, which is, after all, its own kind of medicine. There was a blue flower too, a small clear blue blossom that grew freely in the damp places, whose name in their tongue meant the blue flower, and its cool blue water was used against the overheating of the body, and especially against the heat and the redness and the trouble of the eyes. And we shall come back to it when we speak of the eyes. And there were the soap plants, the roots and the fruits that lathered in water like soap, which the healers used to make cleansing washes for the fevered and the unclean, on the double reasoning that the washing cooled and cleaned the body, and that the bitterness of the soap root carried its own settling virtue. The fever, in their hands, was met from every side at once, by the bitter green tea taken in, by the cool flower, water dabbed on the skin, by the cleansing wash, by the damp plaster on the brow, by the steam of the bath, house to break the heat in a sweat, and by the quiet calling down of the gods. And if much of this did little, the sum of it was a patient kept clean and cool, and watched and comforted, which is itself a kind of cure. And there was one more cure I must give you before we leave the heats behind, and it is the strangest of all to a modern ear, because it uses against the fever the very plant that we now think of as the most warming and the most stimulating of all their herbs, the wild tobacco, which they called pisciatl, and which we shall meet many times tonight, for it ran through their whole medicine like a thread of dark smoke. You would think a hot stimulating herb would be the last thing to give a person burning with fever, and indeed they did not give it to drink in such a case. They rubbed it on the body. The green leaves of the wild tobacco, which is a smaller and a far stronger plant than the gentle tobacco of later commerce, were ground with lime and other things into a green paste, and this paste was rubbed over the limbs and the belly of the sick person, and it was believed to drive out the cold corruption that lay beneath the fever, to rouse the sluggish body, to ease the aches that come with a fever, and to bring on the cleansing sweat. And here, oddly, there was something real at work, for the wild tobacco is a strong plant indeed, far stronger than the cigarette, tobacco of the modern world, and its active substance can be taken in through the skin, so that a body well rubbed with the green paste would feel its effect, a tingling, a numbing of pain where it was rubbed, a quickening of the senses, a slight dizziness, and the easing of an ache. It was, in a real if rough way, a pain reliever applied to the skin, and the healers who reached for it against the aches and pains of a fever, against the sore weary limbs, were reaching for something that genuinely dulled the hurt. They reached for it against a great many things, as we shall see, against fatigue, against the bites of insects, against the toothache, against the cold, against the swellings, rubbing it, chewing it, smoking it, and holding it in their mouths, and we shall come back to it more than once. For the wild tobacco was perhaps the single most used medicine they had. So there is the fever met from every side. Now hold the picture of the cool flour, water and the bitter green tea, and the green paste rubbed on the limbs, and let us turn from the inner heats of the body to its outer hurts, to the cut, and the broken bone and the torn flesh, for the people of the lake city were a warlike people in a hard country, and their healers were, of necessity, among the most skillful menders of wounds in all the world of their time, and what they could do with a sharpened stone, and the sap of a desert plant would, I think, surprise you very much. Let us begin the wounds, as the healers themselves so often began them, with the Maguey, the great grey spike-leaved plant that grew everywhere across that dry high country. The plant we call the agave or the century plant, the plant from whose heart they drew a sweet sap, and a sour drink and a strong fibre, and 1,000 household goods, and which gave them, among all its other gifts, one of the finest wound medicines of the ancient world. For when a person of the lake city took a wound, a cut from a stone blade, a gash from a battle, a deep scrape that would not close, the healer would very often reach first for the Maguey, and pour or pack the fresh sap of it directly into the open wound, and bind it. And this, of all their cures, is one that the careful science of our own age has gone back to and tested and found, to its quiet surprise, to be genuinely and measurably good. The sap of the Maguey, the fresh juice pressed or gathered from the wounded heart of the plant, is a thick, slightly sticky, slightly sweet liquid, and the healers poured it into fresh wounds, packed it into deeper ones, and used it as the moist heart of a dressing bound over a hurt. Their reasoning, in the terms of their world, would have spoken of the plant's cooling and binding and cleansing virtues, of the way the sticky sap drew the foulness out of a wound and sealed it from the bad airs. But here their long watching had led them to something true, that they could not have known the reason for. For we now understand that the sap of the Maguey holds substances that genuinely slow the growth of the small creatures that infect a wound, and that its sugars and its stickiness help to draw moisture and dirt out of the torn flesh, and that a wound packed with the fresh sap and bound clean is a wound given a real and measurable advantage against the rot and the fever that killed so many of the injured in every age before our own. They had found, by patience alone, across uncounted lifetimes of watching which dressings let a soldier live and which let him die, a dressing that worked. And when, in our own time, the careful people of the laboratories took the Maguey syrup and tested it against the very germs that spoil a wound, they found that the old healers had been right, and that the sap did indeed hold the infection back. There are not many of the strange old cures of the world of which one can say that. Of this one, we can. How was it given? The wound was first cleaned, washed with water or with a herb infusion, and the edges drawn together by the healer's hand. Then the fresh Maguey sap was poured in, or the cut leaf of the plant was scraped and the moist pulp packed against the wound. And over this was bound a clean dressing, often a soft cloth or a pad of the very fibre of the Maguey itself, and the binding was renewed as needed, the wound checked, the dressing changed, the sap renewed. For the worst wounds, the wounds of war, the deep gashes and the severed parts, the Maguey sap was the foundation on which the whole mending was built, the moist sealing heart of it, and over it and around it went the other things, the honey, the salt, the herbs that stanched the blood, the splints and the bindings. And so let us speak of those other things, and of the surgery they went with, for the wound craft of the lake city was not a matter of herbs alone, but of the knife and the needle and the setting hand. Consider first the blade they used, which was a wonder in itself, and that is the obsidian, the black volcanic glass that lay in their country in great quantities, and which they knapped and flaked into blades of an edge so fine that nothing in the old world of Europe could match it. Obsidian, worked by a skilled hand, takes an edge keener than the finest steel, an edge so thin that under the strongest glass of our own age it is seen to taper to a single row of molecules, and a cut made with such an edge is a clean cut, a true cut, parting the flesh with the least possible tearing, and healing, for that very reason, more kindly than a cut made with a duller tool. With the obsidian blade the healers of the lake city did real surgery. They lanced the swollen abscess and let out its matter. They opened the gathered wound and cleaned it. They cut away the dead and corrupted flesh from a sore that would not heal, the very thing our own surgeons still do, by the same reasoning, to give the living flesh its chance. They are recorded as having set broken bones and bound them with splints, as having drawn the edges of a wound together and stitched them closed, and the threads they stitched with were drawn, in some accounts, from their own hair, and the needles were the fine sharp thorns of the maguey, which grow at the tip of every leaf, hard and pointed and ready to the hand, so that the very plant that gave the healing sap gave also the needle to sew the wound that the sap would heal. Picture that for a moment, the dark blade of glass, the thorn needle, the hair, thread, and the green sap, and a person being mended by the gathered patience of 1,000 years, in a low room by the lake, by lamplight, gently. Why did the wounds they tended so often heal, when the wounds of soldiers in the great hospitals of the old world so often did not? It was not because they knew of the small creatures that caused the rot, for they did not, no more than my own Tudor masters did. It was because the things they did, almost every one of them, happened to be the right things. They cleaned the wound. They cut away the dead flesh. They drew the edges together. They sealed it with a sap that truly held the infection back. They bound it clean, and they left it largely alone, changing the dressing, watching, but not endlessly probing and burning and tormenting it the way the surgeons of Europe so often did with their boiling oils and their red-hot irons. The gentleness was itself a medicine. A wound cleaned and sealed and left in peace to do its own slow work is a wound with the best chance the ancient world could give it, and the healers of the lake city, by long watching, had arrived at very nearly the gentlest and the wisest wound craft of their age. Beside the maguey sap, the healers used honey upon their wounds and salt, and these too were better choices than they could have known. Honey, the wild honey of the small stingless bees that they kept and gathered, is itself a thing that holds back the spoiling of a wound. For its very sweetness and its thickness draw the water out of the small creatures that would infect the flesh, and a wound dressed in honey is a wound given another real advantage, and our own most modern wound dressings have, in recent years, come quietly back to the honey that the ancient healers used and found it good. Salt rubbed into a wound is a hard and a painful thing, but salt too holds back the rot by the same drawing out of water, and a wound that has been salted, for all the cruelty of it to the sufferer, is a wound less likely to fester. The healers mixed these things, the sap and the honey and the salt, into their wound dressings, sometimes all together, and bound them over the hurt, and the sum of them was a powerful protection against the infection that was the true killer of the wounded. And there were the blood-stanching herbs, the plants the healer reached for first of all, when the blood ran and would not stop, for a soldier could die of the bleeding before any deeper mending could begin. There was a herb the painted book names against the spitting of blood and the flux of blood, a plant whose pounded leaves were pressed into the wound to slow the flow. And there were others, the feathery yarrow, like herbs that grow in that country, as they grow in mine, herbs that have been used to stanch wounds by half the peoples of the earth. For there is something in their pressed green pulp that helps the blood to gather and to clot. The healer pressed the bruised leaves directly onto the bleeding place, and held them there with a firm hand and a firm binding, and the pressure and the herb together slowed the blood and gave it time to clot and close. It is a simple thing, and an old thing, and a true thing, and the lake city healers had it as surely as any. For the broken bone, the healer reached for the splint and the binding, and for certain roots, ground and packed around the break inside the dressing, roots that were thought to knit the bone and to hold back the bleeding within. We cannot say that the roots knit the bone, for bones knit themselves if they are only held still and straight, and that is the true secret of the bone setter's craft in every age, the holding still and the holding straight, which the lake city setters knew and practiced, drawing the broken ends into their proper line and binding them firm against splints of wood or hardened reed until the body did its own slow mending. But the ground roots in the dressing did no harm, and some of them held back the bleeding and the swelling, and the patient, his arm or his leg drawn straight and bound firm and packed with the cool herbs, lay quiet and let the bone do its work. And most often, if the break was a clean one, the bone healed, and the setter was thanked, and the roots were given the credit they had not quite earned. For the stubborn sore that would not close, the running ulcer, the foulness that ate slowly into the flesh, the healers had their salves, made of resins and of animal fats and of pounded herbs, spread thick upon the sore and bound over it. They reached for the resins, the pine, pitch, and the copal, the same fragrant gum they burned for the gods, melted and worked into a salve, for the resins do hold back the spoiling and seal the surface, and were a sound choice. They reached for fats, the fat of certain animals, worked into the salve to carry the herbs and to soften the flesh, and into these they ground the bitter cleansing herbs and the wild tobacco. And the salve was laid on, and the sore was bound, and it was tended day by day. Not every sore closed. The deep and the fed and the cancerous would not close for them any more than for us. But the simple neglected ulcer, the wound gone bad, was often brought back by the cleaning and the cutting away of the dead flesh, and the resinous salve and the patient tending, and the patient walked again who would, untended, have lost the limb or the life. I have given you the wounds now from the inside out, the sap and the honey and the salt, the glass blade and the thorn needle and the hair thread, the blood herbs and the bone, splints and the resin salves, and I have told you the great quiet truth of all of it, which is that the healers of the lake, city, working in the dark of their age, with no knowledge of the cause of the festering, had nevertheless arrived, by patient watching alone, at a wound, craft that was clean and gentle and genuinely effective, very likely better than the wound, craft of the soldiers of Europe who came against them, who still in those years poured boiling oil into the wounds of their own men. There is a lesson in that, somewhere, about how much can be learned by watching carefully and by being kind, even in the deepest ignorance of the why, but it is late, and I will not press it, and we will let it rest. Now we leave the surface of the body, the cut and the break and the open sore, and we go inward, down into the dark, patient country of the belly, to the troubles of the stomach and the bowel, which were as common in the lake, city as they are anywhere, that people eat and drink and live close together, and which the healers met with a whole cupboard of bitter roots and warming spices and gentle gruels, some of them strange and some of them so sensible that we use their like to this very day. Let us begin the troubles of the belly with the small ragged, leaved herb the people called epizote, a strong, smelling green plant with a scent that is harder to forget once you have met it. Sharp and resinous, and a little like turpentine, and a little like nothing else on earth, a herb that to this day flavors the bean pots of that country, and that to this day is given there, in the old way, against the worms of the bowel. For the worms were a great and constant trouble in the lake, city as in every crowded place of the ancient and the not so ancient world, the small and the large worms that live in the gut and steal the strength of a person, and that trouble children worst of all, and the healers fought them with the bitter strong smelling herbs, and chiefly with the epizote. Why epizote? Because the healers had watched and had seen that a person dosed with the strong green herb would pass the worms, and a child grown pale and pot, bellied and listless with the worms would, after the bitter dose, pass them and grow well again. And this was a thing seen and confirmed across many lifetimes, a thing that plainly worked, whatever the reason. And the reason, which they could not have known, is real, for the strong oils of the epizote are genuinely poisonous to the worms of the gut, troubling them and loosening their hold, so that the body can be rid of them. And the herb was used for exactly this purpose, by exactly these people, in an unbroken line from the lake, city down to the present day, and was for a long while taken up even by the physicians of the wider world as a worm medicine, until gentler remedies replaced it. It is a strong herb, and a heavy dose of it can harm. And the healers knew to measure it, to give the bitter green draught in a careful amount, most often to children, on an empty stomach, and to follow it, sometimes, with a mild purge to carry the loosened worms away. From the worms let us turn to the chili, the small fierce fruit that the people of the lake, city loved past all measure, and ate at nearly every meal. The fruit that we now call the chili pepper, and that has spread from their country to flavor the cooking of the whole world, and which they used not only as a food, but as a medicine of the belly, To us it may seem strange to give a thing so hot and so biting to a person whose stomach is already troubled, but the healers reasoned in the terms of warmth and cold, and a sluggish, cold, heavy belly, a digestion gone slow and dull, was to their mind a thing that wanted warming and rousing, and the chili was the warmest and the most rousing thing they had. So they gave it against the slow stomach, against the loss of appetite, against the cold cramping of the gut, ground into the food or steeped into a warm drink to wake the digestion and set it working again. And here too there was something real, for the fierce substance in the chili that makes it burn does in truth rouse the body, where it touches, quickens the flow of the juices of the mouth and the stomach, warms and stirs a sluggish digestion, and eases, by a strange backward path, certain pains, for a thing that birdies the surface can, in the body's confused accounting, dull a deeper ache beneath. The healers use the chili too in a harder way, as the fierce heart of a clyster, a washing, out of the lower bowel given through a tube, on the reasoning that the burning would rouse and clear a blocked and cold and sluggish gut. That was a hard remedy, and not a gentle one, and it would have been kept for the stubborn case, the bound and aching belly that would not move, and we may guess that it sometimes did move it, by the sheer fierce rousing of the thing, though at no small cost to the comfort of the sufferer, against the milder troubles of the stomach, the everyday upsets, the soreness, the unsettledness, the cramping after a heavy meal or a bad one. The healers reached most often for the gentlest thing in all their store, which was the maize itself, the sacred grain that was the very staff of their life, made into a thin warm gruel they called a tolly. The maize was ground and cooked thin in water into a smooth pale porridge, and into it the healer might stir a settling herb, or a little honey, or a touch of chili, as the case required. And this warm, bland, nourishing gruel was given to the person whose stomach was sore, whose appetite had failed, who was weak and could not keep down stronger food. And it sat gently on the troubled belly and nourished without burdening. And it was given to the sick and the very young and the very old and the slowly mending, as a warm thin gruel has been given to such people by every wise nurse in every land since the beginning of cooking. There is no great mystery in it, and no great strangeness, and that is rather the point, for a good half of the everyday medicine of the lake city was of this gentle and sensible kind, the warm gruel, the rest, the watching, the kind hand, and only the other half was strange. For the harder belly trouble, the deep upset, the load of foul matter, the excess of bile that turned the skin yellow and the temper sour, the healers reached again for the purge, as they did against the fever, and they kept among their roots certain strong purging plants, which they gave to clear the body by the lower road. There was a white, rooted plant they called by a name that meant the white medicine, a strong purge given to drive out the excess and the corruption, and there were others, and the healer chose among them by the strength of the case and the strength of the patient, and gave the measured dose, and watched, and stopped at the right time, and followed with the gentle gruels to settle and restore. We have spoken of the purges already, and I will not weary you with them again, save to say that the belly, more than any other part, was the place where the purge seemed to make plain sense, for a fouled stomach truly is sometimes helped by emptying, and the relief of the cleared and lightened gut is a real relief. And the healers watching had seen it and trusted it within the bounds of their care. Against the worst of the belly troubles, the bloody flux, the dysentery that ran through the crowded city in the warm seasons and carried off the weak and the young, the healers had their special roots, the astringent binding roots that draw the loose bowel tight and slow the terrible flux, and one of these the painted book names against the flux of blood. A reddish root pounded and given in water, and there were others of the same drawing, puckering, astringent kind. And here again there was a real virtue, for the astringent roots, full of the substances that pucker the mouth and tighten the flesh, do in truth bind and slow a loose and bleeding bowel, and a person racked with the bloody flux, and given such a root would often find the flux slowed and the cramping eased, which in that disease, which kills chiefly by the draining away of the body's water, was a genuine and a life-giving help. The healers gave the binding root and the warm gruel to restore what was lost, and the rest and the watching. And a portion of those they tended lived who would otherwise have drained away, and that is no small thing to say of any cure. Now I must give you a recipe that joins together several of the things we have spoken of, for it shows you the way the healers braided their medicines, and it is a strengthening tonic, a thing given to put vigor and substance back into a weak and failing body, and it is set down in the old accounts in a way precise enough that you might almost make it yourself. It called for the sweet sap of the yellow-leaved Maguey, the same great plant that gave the wound sap and the fiber and the drink, cooked together with the juice of the yellow chili and the juice of the tomato. That small bright fruit of their gardens that has since gone out to feed the world, and with a measured count of the seeds of a gourd, all worked together into a draught and given to the weak and the wasted to restore them. You can see in it the warming chili to rouse, the nourishing sweet sap to feed, the cooling tomato to balance, the oily seeds to strengthen, all braided into one careful drink. And you can well believe that a depleted body given such a tonic, full of sugar and substance, and the rousing heat of the chili, would feel itself lifted and warmed and fed, and would rise a little from its weakness, whether by deep virtue or by simple nourishment, which is, in the end, the same thing under two names. The healers used charcoal too, and certain fine clean earths and clays, eaten against the poisons and the foulness of the stomach, on the reasoning that the earth would gather to itself the badness in the belly, and carry it away. And here, once more, they had stumbled by long watching onto something true. For fine charcoal does in plain fact gather poisons and foul matter to its surface and hold them, so that our own physicians give it to this day, in just this way, against certain poisons swallowed, and the clean clays too can soothe and bind a troubled gut. The healer gave the powdered charcoal or the fine clay in water against the poisoned stomach, against the deep sickness, and it did, in its quiet way, a real good, gathering up the badness and bearing it out of the body. And the people who took it and were eased did not know the why of it, but the why was sound. And against the weak digestion, the failing of the appetite and the strength, the healers reached once more for the cacao and the vanilla, for we have spoken of the cacao as a fever, cure and a strengthener, but it was given against the weak stomach too, the dark drink flavored with the fragrant vanilla pod, and the small dark flowers and a touch of chili, given warm to wake the failing appetite and to put substance and pleasure back into a person who had stopped wanting to eat. The pleasure of it was itself a medicine. For a sick person who can be coaxed to take a little of something rich and warm and delicious is a sick person being drawn back toward life and the dark spiced chocolate of the lake city, bitter and fragrant and warming, was about as fine a thing to coax a failing appetite with as the ancient world ever made. So there is the belly, met from every side by the worm, herb, and the rousing chili, by the gentle gruel and the binding root, by the purge and the charcoal, and the strengthening tonic, and the dark spiced drink, and you will have noticed, I hope, that a great deal of it was sound. That the healers of the lake city understood the troubles of the gut about, as well as anyone could in that age, and treated them about as well, and that here, in the homely country of the belly, the strange and the sensible lay very close together, the eaten earth beside the warm gruel, the fierce chili, clister beside the kind coaxing cup of chocolate. But I have kept something back, as I always do, and there is one more region of the body to which we must now climb, up from the dark belly to the high lamplit chambers of the head, where the troubles are stranger and the cures stranger still, for here we leave the plain country of cuts and fevers and sour stomachs, and come at last to the aching head, the rotting tooth, the troubled eye, and beyond them into the deepest and the strangest country of all, the country of weariness and of dreams and of the visions that the healers of the lake city sought on purpose, with sacred and terrible plants, to find the hidden causes of the sicknesses they could not see. So do not drift away entirely just yet, for the strangest part of the whole night is climbing slowly toward us, and it begins gently enough with the simple ache of a head. The headache the healers met in several ways, and the first of them will sound familiar to you, for it is much what my own old masters did, and that is the drawing of blood and the easing of the head by emptying it a little. The lake city healers believed, as so many peoples have, that the aching head was an overfull head, a head with too much heat, or too much blood, or too much heaviness gathered into it, and they sought to draw that fullness off, sometimes by a careful cut to let a little blood, sometimes by the dropping of a sharp herb juice into the nose to make the head run and clear, the pungent juice of certain plants pressed and dropped into the nostrils to start the watering, and the sneezing, and the running that they felt would carry the trouble out. It was an unpleasant remedy, the sharp juice in the nose, but a sneeze and a clearing can in truth ease a stuffed and aching head, and the bleeding, though we would not do it now, did sometimes ease a pounding head by the simple lowering of its pressure, and the patient, his head emptied and cleared, often felt the better for it, and slept. For the toothache, that small and patient torment that has bent low the heads of people in every age, the healers of the lake city reached for the things that numbed and the things that burned, and chiefly, once more, for the wild tobacco, the strong green pisiatal, which they packed against the aching tooth and the sore gum, for the strong substance in it numbs the flesh where it touches, dulling the nerve and easing the throb, and a person with a raging tooth, given a wad of the green herb to hold against it, would feel the pain draw back and grow bearable, which is no small mercy when there is a fire in the jaw. They packed the tooth too, with chili and with salt, the fierce and the drawing together, on the reasoning that the burning would rouse, and the salt would draw out the corruption. And they are recorded as having used the hot point, the heated blade or stone touched to the rotten tooth, to burn out the corruption and kill the pain, a hard and a fearful remedy, but one that did, in its brutal way, sometimes end the torment by destroying the dying nerve. And they pulled the ruined tooth, when it could not be saved, with the firm hand and the steady eye, and packed the empty socket with the herbs that stanched the blood and held back the rot. And the patient, emptied of the rotten thing, healed and was at last at peace. For the troubled eye, the red and the running and the overheated eye, the eye saw from the smoke of the cooking, fires that filled every house, the eye dimmed and inflamed. The healers reached for the cooling things, and chiefly for that small blue flower we spoke of among the fever cures, whose cool blue water was dropped into the sore eye to soothe and to cool it, and for a certain root which the painted book says was first softened, oddly and tenderly, in mother's milk before it was used as a lotion for the overheated eyes. There is something very gentle in that, the root steeped in a mother's milk to make a lotion for sore eyes, and the milk itself is a soft and soothing thing, and the cool flower, water a soothing thing, and a sore inflamed eye bathed in such cool gentle washes would in plain truth be eased by them, the heat drawn off, the soreness calmed. Whatever deeper virtue the healers believed the blue flower and the milk-steeped root to hold. They were tender with the eyes, the healers of the lake, city, as people are tender with the eyes everywhere. For the eye is the most precious and the most delicate of the body's gates, and they bathed it and cooled it, and dropped their gentle waters into it, and did, I think, about as much good for it as anyone could. Now we rise from the plain aches of the head, the tooth and the eye and the pounding brow, into the higher and the stranger country, and the first thing we meet there is weariness, the deep grey weariness of the body and the spirit, the fatigue that bows a person down, and against this the healers had some of their loveliest cures, the fragrant flower, waters we touched on among the fevers, made of the most sweetly scented blossoms of their gardens, steeped in water to make a perfumed draught that was given to drink and dabbed on the body to lift away the heaviness and to give, as the old painted book so beautifully says, strength to the body and gladness to the heart. The people of the lake, city believed, you will remember, that the sweet cool fragrance of the right flowers carried a real reviving virtue, and so against the worn and the weary and the heavy, spirited they made these scented waters of magnolia, and of the small sweet flowering shrubs, and of the dark vine, flowers and of the vanilla, and gave them to the tired traveller and the worn-down worker and the convalescent rising slowly back toward strength. Did the flower waters truly revive? Here we cross from the body into the harder country of the spirit, where the medicines work, if they work by gentler and more hidden roads. But I will tell you that I do not think the flower waters were nothing, for there is a real lifting of the heart in sweet scent, a real easing, the same easing you feel yourself when you step from a hard day into a room where something fragrant is steeping, and a worn person given a cool, sweet, smelling draught to sip and a sweet, smelling water to bathe the temples with, in a quiet shaded room, with a kind hand near, was being given a true small comfort, and would rise from it a little restored, a little gladdened, a little lifted, whether by the deep virtue of the flowers, or by the simple human medicine of beauty and rest and kindness, which, again, is in the end the same thing under different names. The healers of the lake city understood, I think, better than many a sterner tradition, that gladness is itself a medicine, and that a thing which gladdens the heart of a weary person has done a real and not a trifling good. And the wild tobacco was here too, of course, against the weariness, for we said it ran through their whole medicine like a thread of smoke, and against the deep fatigue of the long road and the heavy work and the worn spirit the healers gave the pisiatal to be chewed, to be held in the mouth, to be snuffed, to be smoked, and the strong substance in it does, in plain truth, chase away fatigue for a time, quickens the dull mind, lifts the bowed spirit, eases the ache of the tired limbs, and the travellers and the porters and the soldiers of the lake city chewed it on their long marches to keep going, much as people the world over have chewed and smoked and snuffed the stimulating plants to drive back fatigue. It was a true reviver, the wild tobacco, though a strong and not a wholly gentle one, and it carried, as such things always do, its own slow price for those who leaned on it too hard. But as a medicine reached for against the grey weight of weariness, it did, for a time, exactly what they asked of it. And now we come to the strangest country of all, the deepest and the most sacred, and the most carefully guarded region of their whole medicine, and that is the country of the sacred plants, the plants that gave visions that the diviner healers took not to cure the body, but to find out what was wrong with it, to see the hidden cause of a sickness, to find the wandered soul, to learn which god had been offended, to look, as they believed, behind the curtain of the ordinary world into the world where the true causes lay. These were not everyday medicines. They were sacred, and they were dangerous, and they were hedged about with ritual, and with fasting, and with prayer, and they were taken by the seers and the diviners, the special healers who worked the invisible end of the long art, and the people both revered and feared them. I will speak of them gently and with respect, for they were sacred to those who used them. And they are not toys, and the people of the lake city did not treat them as toys, and neither shall we. The first of them was the seed of a climbing vine with white or pale flowers, a kind of morning glory, whose small dark seeds the healers ground and took, or gave to be taken, to bring on the visions in which the hidden causes of things might be seen. The diviner would take the ground seed in the dark and the quiet, after fasting, after prayer, and would pass into a state apart, a waking dream in which it was believed the truth of a sickness might reveal itself, the lost thing be found, the offended power be named. The seed was sacred, kept with care, treated with awe, and it was real in its power, for it holds within it a substance that does indeed turn the mind and bring on the strange waking dreams. And the diviners knew its strength and treated it with the seriousness it deserved, fasting and praying and keeping apart, and using it not for pleasure, but as a tool of their grave and difficult work, the finding out of causes that lay beyond the reach of the ordinary eye. There was the sacred mushroom too, a small dark mushroom of the high wet meadows that they called by a name meaning the flesh of the gods, and this also the diviners took, in the dark, after fasting, in the proper season and the proper way, to pass into the visions, and the taking of it was a solemn and a sacred thing, surrounded by ritual and by song. And in the visions the seer sought the same hidden truths: the cause of the wasting sickness, the name of the thief who had worked the harm, the place where the lost soul had wandered. The people did not take it lightly or alone, but in the gathering, with the songs, with the elders, with the seer to guide them. And they wept, and they spoke, and they saw. And afterward they told the seer what they had seen, and the seer read in it the answer to the trouble. It too was real in its power, the flesh of the gods, holding within it a substance that brings on the deep visions, and the diviners of the lake. City had known it and used it in this grave and ordered and sacred way for longer than anyone could remember. And there was a third of the sacred vision, plants, a small grey-green button of a cactus that grew far to the north, in the dry deserts beyond the lake country, which the seers of those northern lands gathered in long sacred journeys and ate, to pass into the visions, and to draw near, as they believed, to the gods. The people of the lake city knew of it, and prized it, and brought it down from the north along the trade roads, and it too was a sacred and a guarded thing, taken with prayer and with fasting, used by the seers to see what could not otherwise be seen. It was real in its power, like the seed and the mushroom, holding its own vision, bringing substance. And it has been used by the peoples of those deserts in an unbroken sacred line from before the lake. City was built down to this very day, which tells you something of how deeply it was woven into the spirit of that land. Now you may well ask, and it is a fair question to turn slowly over as you grow drowsy, whether these vision plants were medicine at all, in any sense we would own. And the answer is that they were medicine in the way the whole of that healing was medicine, which is that the people of the lake, city, did not draw the hard line we draw between the sickness of the body and the trouble of the spirit, and so the plant that let the seer find the hidden cause of a wasting child, or name the broken vow behind a man's long illness, or locate the wandered soul of a frightened person, was as much a part of the cure as the bitter tea or the Maguey sap. For in their understanding the finding out of the cause was the first and the necessary half of the healing, and the vision plants were the diviner's instruments for that finding out, as the obsidian blade was the surgeon's instrument for the cutting. They were used to see, and the seeing was held to heal. And whatever you and I may make of that, it was a coherent and a serious and a deeply human way of meeting the suffering of the body, the binding together of the visible cure and the invisible cause. And it had carried that people through uncounted generations of sickness and sorrow, and it is not for us, drowsy and warm and far away, by our small candle to mock it. And alongside the vision, plants ran the reading of dreams for the people of the lake. City held that the dream was a true door, that in sleep the warm inner force of a person might wander out and meet things and learn things, and that a dream rightly read could tell of a sickness coming, or of its cause, or of its cure. And so the diviner, healer, was often also a reader of dreams, and the sick person, or the family of the sick person, would tell their dreams to the healer, and the healer would weigh them, and find in them the signs of what was wrong, and what must be done. A dream of falling water, a dream of a certain animal, a dream of the dead, each carried its meaning, and the healer kept these meanings in the long store of the tradition. and read the dreams of the sick the way my own old masters read the color of the urine and the beat of the pulse as a sign of the hidden state of the body and the spirit. There is no harm in it, and perhaps some good, for a person whose dreams are listened to and taken seriously is a person being attended to, being held in the mind of a wise other, and that attending is, once more, a real medicine, whatever the dreams themselves may or may not foretell. So there is the high country of the head, from the simple aching brow up through the weary spirit and the fragrant reviving flower, waters, up into the sacred and the guarded and the visionary country of the seed and the mushroom and the desert cactus and the reed dream, the country where the healers of the lake city went looking for the causes they could not otherwise see. Let it lie strangely and beautifully in your mind, the seer fasting in the dark, the small dark seed, the flesh of the gods, the song, the vision, the finding out, and let us now come gently down again, down out of the dream country, to the most human and the most universal of all the rooms in the house of healing, the room where the children of the lake city came into the world, the birthing room where the midwife waited, who was among the most honored and the most skillful of all the healers of that people. The midwife of the lake city was a healer of her own special and revered kind, a woman trained in the long art of bringing children safely into the world and of tending the mother before and during and after. And she was met with great respect, and her coming into a house was a solemn and a welcome thing, and she spoke, when she came, in the high, formal, beautiful speech of her office, words that have been set down for us, and that are among the most moving things in all the record of that people, words of welcome and of blessing and of grave kind ceremony spoken over the woman about to give birth. She was no rough hand. She was a trained and a careful and a deeply experienced woman, and the birthing craft she practiced was, in its essentials, a sound and a gentle and a wise one. When a woman of the lake city was near her time, the midwife came, and she prepared the room, and she heated the steam bath, the small low temazcoli we spoke of, for the steam bath was at the very center of the birthing craft, and the woman was bathed and steamed, and her body loosened and warmed and made ready in the moist heat. And this, the warm bath that loosens the body and eases the muscles and calms the frightened mind, is a sound and a comforting thing to give a laboring woman, and women in our own age, in their own ways, still seek the warm water and the warm steam for just this easing. The midwife steamed the mother before the birth to ready her, and she steamed her after the birth, day upon day, for 5 or 6 days, to cleanse and to restore the wan body and the gentle heat, and the rest and the careful attention of those days of steaming were a real and a kindly aftercare, far better than the cold neglect that so many women in so many lands have suffered after their labors. And when the labor came on, the midwife had her herbs, and chief among them was a plant the people called by a name that meant the woman medicine, an herb the midwives gave to bring on and to strengthen the pangs of labor, to help the slow or the stalled birth to move, to bear the child down and out. The midwife brewed the herb into a tea and gave it to the laboring woman when the pangs were weak or slow, and the herb was held to push the child, to rouse the womb to its work. And here, as so often, the long watching of the midwives had found something real, for the woman, Medicine does in truth hold a substance that rouses the womb and strengthens its labor, and it has been studied in our own age and found to do just that, and the midwives of the lake city, who knew nothing of why, knew very well that, and used it with care, in the measured amount, for it was strong, and a strong hand with it could harm, and the skilled midwife knew the dose, and the moment as a thing learned over a life of births. The midwife did more than give the herb. She used her hands, and her hands were her greatest skill, for she massaged the laboring woman, and she felt for the child, and she turned the child when it lay wrong, reaching in with a trained and a gentle and a knowing hand to bring a badly placed child into the way it must come. And this, the turning of the child, is among the highest and the most life-saving skills of the midwife's craft in any age, the skill that saves the mother and the child, who would otherwise both be lost, and the midwives of the lake city had it, and practiced it, and saved with it lives beyond counting. She supported the woman in the crouching, kneeling posture they used for birth, which lets the body work with itself and with the weight of the child, a wiser posture in many ways than the lying flat that later ages came to favor. And she spoke to her and steadied her and was there through it all, the trained, calm, knowing presence at the very edge of life and death, which is what a laboring woman has needed above all things in every age that ever was. And when, despite all the skill of the midwife, a birth went very hard, when the child would not come, and the woman's strength was failing, and the danger pressed close, the midwives reached for stranger remedies, the remedies of last resort. And the strangest of these was a medicine made from the tail of a small night creature, a opossum, like animal of their country, whose long bare tail the midwives prized greatly, for they had found, across the generations, that a decoction made by boiling a piece of that tail, given to a woman in a stalled and desperate labor, would bring on the strong pangs and speed the birth that would otherwise not move. They ground or boiled the tail and gave the draught, and the woman, it was held, would be delivered, and the midwives trusted this remedy above almost all others for the hard birth, and passed it down with care from one to the next. And here is one of the small quiet wonders of the whole long record, for our own careful people, looking back at this strangest of the midwives' cures. The boiled tail of the little knight, animal given to bring on a stalled labor, have studied that creature, and have found that there is indeed a substance in it that acts upon the laboring womb, a real and measurable thing, so that the midwives of the lake city, reaching in their extremity for the boiled tail of a humble animal, were reaching, without any possible way of knowing the why, for a true and a working medicine, found by nothing but the patient, terrible watching of which births moved after the draught, and which did not, across more generations than anyone could number. It is a strange thing to sit with, that so odd a remedy, the boiled tail of a small marsupial, should turn out to hold a real power over the very crisis it was given for, and it should make us slow, I think, to laugh at any of the old, strange cures before we have looked carefully to see what the long watching may have found that we have not yet thought to look for. The midwives had their amulets too, for the hard birth, the small-held things and the worn things that a laboring woman might grip or wear, and these we cannot credit with any power over the body. The held stone, the worn token, but we should not be quick to call them useless either. For a frightened woman in the long danger of a hard labor, given something to hold, something blessed, something that the wise women of her people had held and blessed before her, is given a thing to fasten her fear to, a small anchor in the storm. And the calming of a laboring woman's terror is no trifling medicine, for terror itself can stall a labor, and a woman steadied and calmed and given heart may find her body able to do what fear had locked it from doing. So the held amulet, useless in itself, may yet have helped, by the long roundabout road through the frightened mind into the laboring body, which is a road that the healers of the lake, city, who drew no hard line between the body and the spirit, understood perhaps better than we do. And when the child was safely come, the midwife's work was not done, for there was the cutting and the tending of the cord, and the washing of the child, and then the great ceremony of the bathing and the naming, in which the midwife spoke long and beautiful formal words over the newborn, words of welcome into the hard and lovely world, words that named the child's lot and blessed its days. And the child was bathed with care, and presented to the four directions, and given over to the calendar, priest to learn the sign of its birth and the fortune that sign foretold. This was ceremony, not medicine, in our reckoning, and yet it was woven into the whole. For the people of the lake, city held that the warm bright inner force we spoke of, the force kept in the head and tied to one's day of birth, was settled into the child in these first days and rites, and that the proper welcoming and naming and blessing of the child was a part of the making of it whole and well. And so the midwife's ceremony was, in their understanding, the completing of the birth, the settling of the new soul into its new body. And she spoke her grave, kind words over the bathed and blessed child, and the work of bringing it safely into the world was at last complete. So there is the birthing room, and the honored midwife, the steam, bath, and the woman, medicine, and the turning hand, and the boiled tail of the night, creature, and the held amulet, and the ceremony of the bath, and the name. And I have given it to you fully, for it was among the best and the wisest of all their healing, the work of trained and careful and deeply experienced women at the very edge of life, and it deserves to be remembered with respect, and it makes, I think, a gentle and a fitting thing to have rested in for a while, the safe coming of a child, before we move on to the last regions of the body and the spirit. But move on we must, and there is the skin to speak of yet, the wide outer country of the body that meets the world, and then, at the last, the deepest and the quietest country of all, the country of the spirit, where this long night will come to its close. Let us turn, then, to the skin, the great outer surface of the body, the part that is most seen and most troubled by the small persistent miseries of life, the scabs and the rashes and the spreading sores, the mange and the ringworm, the boils and the swellings, the dandruff of the scalp and the cracking of the feet, all the small wretched troubles that do not kill but that gnaw at the comfort and the dignity of a person day upon day, and against all of which the healers of the lake city had their long array of washes and salves and poultices, some of them strange, and some of them so plainly sensible that we use their like still. For the unclean skin, the scabbed and the scaly, and the itching skin, the mange and the crusted scalp, the healers reached first for the soap plants, the roots and the fruits of certain plants, that lather richly in water like soap, which they use to wash the body and the hair and the troubled places, and this, the plain washing of dirty diseased skin with a true cleansing wash, is about the soundest thing that could be done for it in any age. For a great part of the skin's misery in a world without soap, as we know, it is simple uncleanness, and the small creatures that breed in it, and a body and a scalp well washed, with a real lathering soap, root, again and again, would be eased of a great deal of its trouble by the cleaning alone. The healers used the soap, roots for the dandruff and the scaly scalp, lathering and washing the head, and they joined to the wash the bitter herbs and the plant, ashes worked into a kind of ointment that was rubbed into the scalp after the washing, the ash being mildly caustic and drawing, the bitter herbs being cleansing, and between the washing and the ointment the scaly scalp was often brought back to health, the flakes cleared, the itching stilled. For the ringworm and the spreading scaly patch, the creeping sore that widened slowly on the skin, the healers reached for the resins and the bright mineral pigments worked into a salve, the pine, pitch and the copal and the colored earth's ground, and mixed with fat and laid thick upon the patch, and the resins do in truth hold back the spoiling of the skin and seal the surface. And some of the bright mineral earths they used, the sulphurous and the metallic ones, carry a real power against the small creeping things that cause such patches. So that here once again the long watching had found, among many salves that did little, certain ones that genuinely worked, and the healer who reached for the resinous, mineral, bright salve against the ringworm was reaching, in a real number of cases, for a true remedy, and the patch cleared, and the skin grew whole, and the salve was given the credit it had, for once earned. For the swelling and the inflamed and angry place, the hot red swollen limb, the gathered boil rising to its head, the healers reached for the poultices, the soft moist masses of pounded herbs and other things laid warm upon the swelling to draw it and to ease it. And among the strangest of these was a poultice made with the froth of the fermented drink of the Maguey, the sour milky drink they made from the same great plant, whose thick foam was laid upon the swelling. And there were poultices of pounded green herbs, and of warmed leaves, and of the cooling clays, each chosen by the nature of the swelling. The hot and angry one met with the cool clay, the slow sluggish one met with the warming herb. The poultice is an old and a sound remedy the world over, for a warm moist mass laid on a gathering boil does in plain truth soften it and draw it and hasten it to its head and its bursting and its relief, and a cool moist mass laid on a hot swelling does in plain truth soothe and cool it. And the healers of the lake city used them well, and eased with them a great deal of the small daily misery of the swollen and the inflamed. And for the deep inflammation, the swollen joint, the inflamed and painful limb, the healers reached for a salve made from the leaves of a fragrant laurel, tree of their country, pounded and worked into an ointment, and rubbed upon the painful place. And this too our own careful people have gone back and studied, and have found in those laurel leaves a real power to ease inflammation and to calm the angry swollen flesh, so that the salve the healers rubbed on the aching joint was, once more, no empty thing but a true if gentle remedy, found by watching, used by hand, passed down through the generations of those who tended the painful limbs of their people. You will have noticed, I hope, How often it falls out this way, that the careful people of our own laboratories, going back to test the old strange cures of the lake, city find in them, more often than chance alone could explain, a real and immeasurable virtue, the Maguey sap against the wound, the worm, herb against the worm, the woman medicine against the stalled labor, the laurel against the inflammation. And it should make us hold the whole of their healing in a kind of quiet respect, as the long patient work of intelligent people watching the world with great care across a very long time. And there were the cooling earths and clays, painted upon the burnt and the itching and the over-hot skin, the fine pale clays mixed with water and spread upon the sunburn, and the rash and the small burn, drawing the heat and cooling the surface. And this too is sound, for a cool moist clay upon a hot burnt patch of skin does ease and cool it, drawing off the heat. And the healers used the clays freely against all the heated troubles of the skin, and against the bites and the stings of the small creatures of that warm country. And they soothed with them, and cooled with them, and gave a real small comfort thereby. So there is the skin, met with the cleansing soap, roots and the drawing ashed ointments, the resinous mineral salves against the creeping sore, the poultices of froth and herb and clay against the swelling and the boil, the laurel salve against the deep inflammation, the cool clays against the burn and the bite. And you will see, I think, that the wide outer country of the body was as carefully tended as the inner, with the same braiding of the strange and the sensible, the same long patient finding out of what truly worked, and the same gentle and persistent and largely effective care. Now we come at last to the final country, the deepest and the quietest of all. And it is the country of the spirit, and I have kept it for the last on purpose, for it is the part of their healing that is most strange to us and most beautiful, and it is best heard now, when you are already grown drowsy and soft and warm, when the body is quieting towards sleep, and the mind is loosening its grip on the hard edges of the day, for the cures of the spirit are themselves a kind of quieting, kind of gentling, a kind of being spoken over. And to hear of them now, as you drift, is to be a little touched by them yourself. You will remember that the people of the lake city held a person to be a weaving together of forces, and chief among them the warm bright inner force kept in the head, tied to the sun and to one's day of birth, the force they thought could be shaken loose by a great fright or a hard fall, so that a person badly frightened might in truth lose a little of themselves, a little of that bright force scattering away, and grow pale, and lose their appetite, and waste, and sicken, in a way that no herb of the body could mend, because the trouble was not in the body at all, but in the wandered and the scattered self. This sickness, the sickness of the frightened, and the soul shaken, was among the most real and the most feared of all the troubles the healers met, and it has a name still in that country. Among the people who carry the old knowledge down, and the healers of the lake city had their grave and gentle craft for the mending of it, the calling home of the scattered force, and it is, to my mind, the most touching of all their cures. But before I tell you how the lost self was called home, hold a moment longer, for the cures of the spirit begin not with the calling home, but with the finding out, with the diviner's grave work of discovering what was wrong, and that work was itself the first half of the healing, and it is worth the telling. For when a person of the lake city fell sick in a way that the body's medicines would not touch, when the wasting and the paleness and the failing had no cause that the herb doctor could name, the family would go to the diviner, the seer, the reader of hidden things, and the diviner would set about the patient finding out of the cause. And this finding out was done in several strange and careful ways that I will lay before you slowly now, for they are among the strangest and the most human of all the things the healers did. The first of the diviner's ways of finding out was the casting of the maize, the throwing of a handful of the grains of maize, sometimes onto a cloth, sometimes onto the surface of water in a bowl, and the reading of the pattern in which they fell, which grains lay close and which lay scattered, which floated and which sank, which lay turned this way and which that. For in that pattern the diviner believed the truth of the sickness was written, the cause of it, the cure of it, the fate of the sufferer. The diviner would cast the grains and bend close and read them in the long, learned way of the tradition, and from the reading would come the answer, the naming of what was wrong. We may smile gently at the reading of scattered maize, and yet I would ask you to notice what was truly happening in that quiet room, which was that a wise and an attentive person was bending the whole of their long experience and their deep knowledge of the people and the place and the family and the sufferer onto the question of what was wrong, and using the cast grains as a way to focus and to free that knowledge, the way a person staring into a fire finds their thoughts come clear. And the answer the diviner read in the maize was very often, in truth, the answer their long watching had already half found, given shape and given voice through the casting. The second of the diviner's ways was the measuring of the arm, the taking of the patient's forearm and the measuring of it against the span of the hand or the length of the fingers, again and again, watching whether the measure came out long or short, even or uneven, for a change in the measure, a shortening and unevenness, was read as a sign of the wandered soul, of the scattered force, of the trouble in the hidden self, and the diviner measured and measured, murmuring, watching, and read in the changing length of the arm the state of the inner forces of the sick person. It is a strange thing, the measuring of the arm, and we cannot think it told the diviner anything true about the length of the limb, which does not change, but the very act of it, the careful repeated touching and measuring and attending, the laying of the diviner's hands again and again upon the body of the sick and frightened person, was itself a kind of medicine, the medicine of being attended to, being handled gently and gravely, and with full attention by a wise other who plainly cared and plainly knew their work. And a sick, frightened person so attended to is a person already being a little healed. And there was the divining by water, the gazing into the still surface of water in a bowl, and the divining by the visions of the sacred plants we have spoken of, the seed and the mushroom, taken by the diviner to see the hidden cause, and all of these were the diviner's instruments for the finding out, the first necessary half of the cure, the naming of what was wrong. For in the understanding of that people, you could not mend a trouble until you had named it, until you knew whether it was a wandered soul, or a God offended, or a vow broken, or a harm worked by an envious neighbor, or a punishment for a thing done. And the diviner's grave art was the naming of it. And the naming, once done, opened the road to the mending. And so we come to the mending of the spirit, and chief among its troubles, as I said, was the loss of the warm, bright inner force, the fright, sickness, the scattering of the self by a great fear or a hard fall. And the cure of it was the calling home, a grave and a tender ceremony in which the healer set about to gather the scattered force and to call it back into the body where it belonged. The healer would go, sometimes, to the very place where the fright had happened, the place where the person had fallen, or been terrified, or seen the dreadful thing, for it was held that the scattered force lingered near the place of its scattering, and there the healer would call it by name, gently, coaxingly, the way you would call a frightened child or a lost animal home in the dusk, speaking soft words, offering small things, gathering up, as it were, into a cloth or into the hands, the lost and frightened force, and bearing it back to the body of the sufferer, and laying it back, and speaking it home, settling it back into the head where it belonged, so that the person, made whole again, the scattered self gathered and returned, might cease their wasting and their paleness and grow well. Now you and I, drowsy and warm and far away, may say that nothing was truly gathered up in that cloth, that no real force was borne home and laid back into the head, and in the plain sense of the body we would be right. And yet consider what was truly happening, and consider it gently, for it is worth the considering. A person had been badly frightened, badly shaken, and had fallen into the real and the well-known sickness that great fear can bring, the wasting, the paleness, the loss of appetite and of sleep, and of the will to live, the sickness we ourselves know to be real, the sickness of the deeply traumatized and the deeply afraid. And the healer came and took that trouble with full seriousness, and named it, and went to its very source, and performed over the sufferer a grave and a beautiful and a deeply meaningful ceremony, in which the whole weight of the people's belief and care and love was brought to bear on the gathering, home of the lost self, and the sufferer was told, with all the authority of the tradition, that their scattered self had been found, had been gathered, had been brought home, had been settled back where it belonged, and that they were whole again and would be well. And a frightened, traumatized, wasting person told this with full ceremony, by a healer they trusted utterly, surrounded by the care of their people, may very well have begun, then, to mend, the fear at last given a shape and a name and an ending, the broken self at last told that it was whole, and the telling, in the strange deep way of the frightened mind, beginning to make it so. The calling home of the soul, useless in the plain country of the body, may have been among the truest medicines they had, for the troubles that live not in the body, but in the frightened and the broken spirit, which no herb can reach, and which are healed, when they are healed at all, very much in this way, by being named, and taken seriously, and given a ceremony, and told that they are over. And weaving through all the cures of the spirit, through the finding out and the calling home, ran the smoke of the copal, the pale gold resin of the desert tree that we met at the very beginning of our night, rising in its thread from the high temples over the darkening city, for the copal was burned in the sick room and over the patient, and at every grave and sacred turn of the healing, its sweet dry smoke filling the room, carried to the four directions, offered to the gods, and it was held to cleanse the air of the bad and the heavy and the unclean, to drive out the foul vapors, to please the powers, to make the room and the moment sacred and fit for the work of healing. We cannot credit the smoke with driving out any sickness of the body, and yet the burning of the sweet resin in the sick room was not nothing, for the smell of it, sweet and dry and solemn, marked the room as a place set apart, a place of care and of ceremony, and there is a real settling in that, a real comfort in the sick person and in the family alike, to have the sweet sacred smoke rising, to have the room made fragrant and grave and holy, to feel that the proper and the ancient things were being done, and that comfort, that settling, that marking of the place and the moment as sacred and as cared for was its own quiet medicine, and it filled, with its pale sweet thread of smoke, very nearly every room in which the healers of the lake city did their work. And there was the sweeping, the cleansing of the sick person with bundles of fresh green herbs, which the healers passed over the body of the sufferer, brushing and sweeping along the limbs and the trunk and over the head, again and again, in a slow, rhythmic, gentle motion, gathering up, as they believed, the bad airs and the heavy influences and the unclean things that clung to the sick person, sweeping them off and away, and then casting the used bundle aside, or burning it, or carrying it far off and leaving it, so that the gathered badness might be borne away with the herbs that had gathered it. They swept the sufferer with the bundles of fragrant leaves, murmuring, attending, and the rhythmic gentle brushing of the body with the cool green herbs, the slow repeated soothing motion of it, the sweet smell of the crushed leaves rising as they swept, was a deeply calming and a deeply comforting thing to receive, and a sick and anxious person swept slowly and gently with the green bundles, attended so closely and so tenderly, was being soothed in body and in mind both, the slow brushing easing the tense and frightened body, the way a slow gentle stroking eases any frightened creature. And whatever the sweeping did, or did not do to the bad airs they believed in, it did this, it calmed and it soothed, and it gentled, and that was a true and a kindly medicine, and one that asks nothing of belief to work. And there were the prayers, the long, formal, beautiful prayers the healers spoke over the sick, and these are the last and the most moving of all the cures of the Spirit, and I will tell you of them gently, for they are the proper thing to end on, here, as the candle burns low, and you yourself grow drowsy. The healers of the lake, city, and above all the midwives and the diviners, kept in their memory long-set speeches, grave and formal and lovely, that they spoke over the sufferer at the turning points of the healing, speeches that named the trouble and called on the powers and blessed the sick person and gave heart and gave comfort, speeches handed down word for word through the generations, polished by long use into a deep and a rhythmic and an almost musical beauty, and the speaking of them over the sick was held to be a part of the cure, a true part, as real as any herb. The healer would lean close to the sufferer and speak the long grave words slowly, in the high formal speech of the office, and the words would fall over the sick person like a slow warm rain, naming their trouble, promising them care, calling on the great powers to look kindly on them, telling them they were held, they were tended, they were not alone, they would be made well. And I will tell you, as one who has spoken his own small comforts over the sick across a long life, that there is no medicine truer than this, the speaking of grave, kind, formal words over a frightened, suffering person by a healer they trust, for it gathers up the whole of their fear and gives it into older and wiser hands. It tells them that what is happening to them has been met before, has a name, has a shape, has a way through. It sets them inside the long story of their people and tells them they are held by it, and it eases, more than any root or leaf can ease, the deepest part of all sickness, which is the fear and the loneliness of the sick. The healers of the lake city knew this, knew it in their bones, and they spoke their long, lovely prayers over the sick as gravely and as carefully as they pounded their herbs, for they understood, those healers, that a person is not only a body, that a person is a body and a frightened spirit braided together, and that to mend the one without tending the other is to do only half the work. And among the cures of the spirit there was one strangest still, and I will give it to you before we turn at last toward sleep, and it is the cure by confession. For the people of the lake city held that certain sicknesses came from the wrongs a person had done, the broken vows, the secret faults, the hidden shames carried heavy in the heart, and that such a sickness could be lifted by the confessing of the fault, the speaking out of the hidden thing before the goddess who governed such matters, the grave old goddess they called the eater of filth, for it was her office to take into herself the confessed wrongs of the people and to bear them away, to eat the filth of the troubled conscience and leave the person clean. A person sick with a heavy hidden fault would go to the diviner, priest of that goddess, and would confess once, fully, the thing they had carried, the whole of it spoken out at last, and the priest would hear it, and would lay upon them some small penance, and would declare them cleansed, the fault taken up by the goddess and borne away, and the person, unburdened at last of the long, carried secret weight, would very often rise from it eased and lightened, and, in a real and not a small way, healed. For consider, gently, what this was, the confession before the eater of filth, and you will see that it was among the wisest of all their medicines, for they had understood, those healers, the thing that the wise of every people have understood in their own ways, that a hidden fault carried long and secret in the heart is a true sickness, a weight that wears down the body and sours the spirit and steals the sleep and the strength, and that the speaking out of it, the full confessing of it to a grave and a trusted hearer who will take it without horror and declare it forgiven, is a true and a deep healing, the lifting of a weight that no herb could ever lift, the cleansing of the conscience, the unburdening of the long, carried secret, and a person who has at last spoken out the thing they carried, and been heard, and been forgiven, and been declared clean, walks lighter ever after, and sleeps and mends. The people of the lake city had this, the cure by confession, the eater of filth who took the secret wrongs and bore them away, and it was, I think, as true a medicine for the troubles of the heart as any people anywhere has ever found. Now I have given you the spirit, the whole of it, the finding out by the cast maze, and the measured arm, and the gazed into water, and the sacred vision, the calling home of the scattered self, the cleansing smoke of the copal, the gentle sweeping with the green bundles, the long grave beautiful prayers, the cure by confession before the eater of filth, and you will see, I hope, that the healing of the spirit was not a small or a foolish corner of their medicine, but a great and a central and a deeply wise part of it. The part that tended the troubles that live not in the body, but in the frightened and the burdened and the broken self, the troubles that no root or leaf can reach and that are healed, when they are healed at all, by being named, by being taken seriously, by being given ceremony and care and grave kind words, by being heard and forgiven and called home. And in this, the healers of the lake city were perhaps wiser than many a sterner and a more bodily tradition that came after them, for they never forgot that a person is a body and a spirit woven together, and they tended both. But the night is not quite done, for I have a few more of the strange cures to lay before you yet, the smaller and the scattered ones that did not fit neatly into any one room of the body. And I will give them to you now, gently, as the last small offerings of the evening, before we turn together towards sleep. Stay with me just a little longer, for these last few are among the strangest of all, and they make a fitting close to our long, slow walk through the medicine of the city on the water. Let me give you first the cure for the bite of the serpent. For the country of the lake city was a warm and a green country, full of snakes among the maize and along the watercourses, and the bite of a venomous serpent was a real and a sudden terror, and the healers met it with whatever they had, and chiefly with the wild tobacco again, the strong green pisciatal, pounded fresh and laid thick upon the bite, and bound there. And sometimes the bite was first cut or sucked to draw the venom, and the green paste laid on after, and a draught of bitter herbs given to drink to fight the poison within. We cannot say the green paste drew the venom out, for venom once in the flesh is not easily drawn. But the strong substance in the tobacco numbs the pain of the bite, which is a fierce pain, and the cutting and the sucking, if done at once, may draw off a little of the venom before it spreads, and the calm, grave care of the healer steadied the terrified sufferer, and a portion of those bitten lived, for not every serpent is deadly, and not every bite delivers its full venom, and the ones who lived gave the credit to the green paste and the bitter draught, and the healers, watching, kept the remedy, and used it again at the next bite, as healers in every land have done with the cures that seem to save. Let me give you next the cure for the gout, and the swollen aching joint of the foot, that slow rich man's torment of the swollen, and the burning toe. And here too the healers reached for the wild tobacco, the strong green pisciatal, ground and laid upon the hot swollen joint, for the strong substance in it numbs the pain where it is laid, and eases the fierce ache of the gouty joint. And it was used freely for this, the easing of the gout and the swollen painful foot, rubbed and bound onto the burning place, and a person racked with the gout, and given the green paste to numb it, would feel the fire draw back, and the throb ease, which is a real and a welcome mercy, for the gout is among the fiercest of the slow pains, and anything that dulls it is prized. They join to it the cooling clays and the poultices of cool green herb, laid upon the hot joint to draw the heat. And between the numbing tobacco and the cooling clay the gouty foot was eased as well. I think, as it could be eased in that age, which is to say not cured, for the gout is a deep trouble of the body's making, but quieted, dulled, made bearable, which is a great deal to a person whose foot is on fire. Let me give you next the cure for the troubles of the lower body, the swollen and the bleeding piles, the aching of the seat, the small wretched troubles of that hidden region, against which the healers had their salves and their washes and their cooling applications, the resinous salves laid on to soothe and to seal, the astringent binding herbs to draw the swollen flesh tight, the cooling clays and washes to ease the heat and the soreness. And these are sound remedies still, for the astringent herbs do in truth shrink the swollen flesh of the piles, and the soothing salves do in truth ease the soreness, and a person tormented in that hidden and unspoken way, and tended with the cool washes and the binding herbs and the soothing salves, was eased of a real and a wretched misery quietly, without shame, by a healer who took the small troubles as seriously as the great. Let me give you next a stranger thing, the cure of the person struck by lightning or terrified by the storm. For the people of the lake city held the lightning and the storm to be the work of certain great rain powers, the small helpers of the rain, God, and a person struck by lightning, or even merely terrified by a near and a dreadful storm, was held to have been touched by those powers, marked by them, and was tended with special grave care, with the steam, bath, and the herbs and the prayers, and the offerings to the rain powers, and a person who had merely been terrified by the storm, and had fallen into the fright, sickness we spoke of. The wasting and the paleness of the badly frightened was tended by the calling, home of the scattered self, and the grave kind prayers, and the cleansing sweep with the green bundles, and was, by all that care and ceremony, often eased and mended, the terror given a shape, and a meaning and an ending, the frightened self called home, which is, as we said, the true cure of the fright sickness, however it was come by. Let me give you next the stones, for the people of the lake city, like so many peoples, prized certain stones for their healing virtues, and wore them, and carried them, and used them in their cures. There was the green stone, the jade, which they prized above gold, and which they held to carry the virtue of water, and of life, and of health, and they wore it, and ground a little of it into the cooling cures, as we saw with the fever plaster, and a woman near her time might wear, or hold a certain stone, an eagle stone, a hollow stone with a smaller stone loose within it, that rattled when it was shaken, held to ease, and to hasten the birth, by a kind of sympathy, the loose stone within the larger one, being like the child within the mother. And as the loose stone could fall out so, it was held, the stone would help the child to come. We cannot credit the stones with any power over the body, the worn jade, the rattling eagle stone, and yet the worn and the carried stone, like the held birth amulet, gave the frightened person something to fasten their hope and their fear upon, a small solid anchor of belief, and the calming that such a thing brought to an anxious sufferer was, as we have said more than once tonight, no trifling medicine, for a calmed and a heartened sufferer mends better than a terrified one, and the stones, useless in themselves, may yet have helped along that long roundabout road through the steadied mind. Let me give you next the cure for the cough, and the trouble of the chest, the thick chest and the hard breathing, and the cough that racked a person through the cold nights of the high valley, against which the healers reached for the warming and the loosening herbs, the resins dissolved and given to ease, and to loosen the chest, the honey to soothe the raw throat, the warm steam of the bath, house to loosen the thick breath, the wild tobacco smoked or given to ease the spasm of the cough. And these are sound and gentle remedies, for the honey does in truth soothe the raw and coughing throat, and the warm, moist steam does in truth loosen a thick and a labouring chest, and the warming resins ease, and the rest restores, and a person coughing through the cold nights, given the honeyed draught, and the warm steam, and the quiet rest, was eased of the worst of it, and slept, and mended, as a person with a cough is mended in any age, by warmth, and by soothing, and by time. And let me give you, last of all the scattered small cures, the remedy for the weariness of the long road, the traveller's fatigue. For the people of the lake city were great walkers and great carriers, and the porters bore their heavy loads on their backs across long mountain roads, with only the strap across the brow to hold them. And against the deep weariness of such labour, the travellers chewed the wild tobacco to drive back the fatigue, and they drank where they could get it, the dark bitter cacao to lift, and to warm and to strengthen them, and they bathed their worn feet in the cool herb waters at the road's end. And they steamed themselves in the bath house when they came at last to a place that had one, and between the chewed tobacco on the road, and the cacao, and the cool foot bath, and the steam at the journey's end, the worn traveller was revived and restored, and made ready for the road again. And these are, you will notice, very nearly the things you yourself might reach for. The something to keep you going, the warm reviving drink, the warm bath at the end. For the easing of weariness is much the same in every age and every land, and the healers of the lake city had found, by their long watching, very nearly the same answers to it that you and I would find. Now, before we make our last slow turn towards sleep, let me circle back through the body once more gently, the way an old man circles back through his memories at the end of a long evening, and gather up a handful of the cures I have not yet given you, the smaller and the quieter ones, each in its turn slowly, so that you may let them wash over you as you drift, asking nothing, only listening. Let me tell you of the cure for the stone, the small hard stone that forms within the body and brings the terrible griping pain of the lower back and the difficulty in passing water, a torment known to the people of the lake city as it has been known to suffering people in every age and every land. The healers met it with the herbs that move the water, the plants that bring on the flow and ease the passing, certain roots and leaves brewed into a draught and given freely to drink, that the body might be flushed, and the small stone borne out on the increased flow. And here once more they had found something sound, for there are indeed plants that gently quicken the body's making of water, and a sufferer of the stone given such draughts, made to drink, and to pass much water, was given a real chance to flush the small stone out before it grew large. And the relief, when at last the stone passed, and the griping eased, was credited to the herbs, and the herbs had earned a part of it, for the flushing was real, and the easing was real, and a portion of those who suffered the stone were truly helped. Let me tell you of the cure for the trouble of the ear, the aching ear, the running ear, the ear that had grown sore and deaf, against which the healers dropped their warm herb juices, the pressed juices of certain plants warmed and dropped gently into the aching ear to ease and to soothe it, and laid warm poultices over it, the warm being a true ease to the aching ear, as a warm cloth held to a sore ear eases it still, and the gentle warm juices soothed, and the patient, the aching ear warmed and dropped and soothed, and the head laid quiet on the warm side, was eased and slept. They were careful with the ear, as they were careful with the eye, knowing it for a delicate gate. And they did not probe it roughly, but soothed it gently, with the warm and the soft and the kind, which is about the best that anyone could do for a sore ear before our own age, and is, in truth, still much of what a wise nurse does for it now. Let me tell you of the cure for the mother whose milk had failed, for the nursing of the child was a matter of life in the lake city where there was no other good food for a baby, and a mother whose milk dried up was a real and a frightening trouble, and the healers reached for the herbs that were held to bring on and to increase the milk, certain plants brewed into draughts and given to the nursing mother to drink, and joined to these the good nourishing foods, the rich maize gruels and the strengthening drinks, and the rest, and the easing of the mother's worry, for a worried and an exhausted and an underfed mother makes little milk, and a rested and a well-fed and a heartened one makes more. And so the herbs and the good food and the rest and the calming care together did, in a real number of cases, bring the milk back, whether by any deep virtue in the herbs, or by the simpler medicine of feeding and resting and heartening the mother, which is once again, in the end, the same thing under two names. And the child was saved, and the mother eased, and the herbs were thanked. Let me tell you of the cure for the burn, the scald, the flesh seared by the cooking fire, or the spilled hot drink, against which the healers reached for the cool, and the soothing and the sealing. The cool clay spread upon the burn to draw the heat, the soothing saps, and the soft moist pulps of certain cooling plants laid on to ease it. The Maguey sap again, that great helper, laid on the burn both to soothe, and to hold back the spoiling of the seared flesh, and these are sound, for a burn cooled at once, and kept clean and moist and sealed heals far better than a burn left dry and dirty to fester. And the healers, cooling and soothing and sealing the burn, gave it about the best tending the ancient world could give, and the burnt flesh, so tended, healed cleaner, and with less of the dreadful scarring than it would have done untended. And the sufferer was spared a measure of the long misery of the badly healed burn. Let me tell you of the herbs of the bath, for we have spoken often of the steam bath, the temazcoli, but I have not told you of the herbs they cast into it, the fragrant green bundles of leaves they brought into the steam and brushed over the body and steeped in the water thrown against the hot stones, so that the little room filled not only with steam, but with the sweet green scent of the crushed leaves, and the body was switched and brushed with the warm, wet, fragrant bundles, and this, the bathing in the herb-scented steam, the gentle switching with the warm leaves, the breathing of the green fragrant vapor, was a deep and a whole body easing, loosening the stiff limb and the aching back and the tense and frightened spirit all at once. And it was given for very nearly every trouble, for the aches of age, for the chill, for the worn spirit, for the recovering body, and it eased more broadly and more gently than any single herb, by the warmth and the moisture and the fragrance and the rest and the slow attended brushing all together. And a person who came out of the herb, scented steam loose and clean and emptied and calm, had been given a true and a broad and a gentle medicine, one of the best they had. Let me tell you, while we linger in the bath house, of the tending of the body for its own beauty and health, the care of the hair and the skin, not only against disease, but for their good ordering. For the people of the lake, city tended their bodies with great care, washed often, kept clean, dressed the hair, anointed the skin, and held this ordinary daily, tending to be a part of health, as in truth it is. For a body kept clean and well ordered is a body less troubled by the small diseases of dirt and neglect. And the healers and the wise women kept the washes, and the oils, and the dressings for this daily tending, the soap, roots for the washing, the sweet oils, and the cooling clays for the skin, the herbs for the hair, and the people used them, and were the healthier for the using. And there is a quiet wisdom in that, in the holding of the ordinary daily care of the body, to be a part of medicine, which our own age, with all its learning, has sometimes been slow to remember. And let me tell you, last of all in this gathering up of the great steam, Bath is the hospital of that people, the place to which they brought so very many of their troubles. For I want you to hold it in your mind, as we turn toward sleep, the small low domed house of stone by the doorway, the glowing hot wall, the thrown water, the rising billowing fragrant steam, the sick or the weary or the laboring, or the mending person crouched within, brushed with the warm green bundles, sweating, easing, loosening, cleansing, and coming out at last soft and clean and emptied and calm. For in that one small steam-filled room you can see the whole spirit of their healing gathered, the warmth and the cleansing, the herbs and the gentle hands, the body and the spirit tended together, the patient and the kind and the largely effective care, and the goddess of the bath honored at its little door, and the sufferer sent home eased. It was their hearth and their hospital and their quiet sanctuary, the steam bath, and into it went so very much of what was best in the long patient art of the healers of the city on the water. There are a few more of the strange cures I would set before you yet, the last of the night, and I will give them slowly, for the candle is low now, and your breathing has surely begun to lengthen and to slow, and these last ones may simply drift over you, asking nothing. Let me tell you of the bright gold, flowered herb the people called Yotli, the marigold of their country, a strong scented plant, with a sharp, clean, aromatic smell, which the healers used in many ways, burned and drunk and ground, and which they trusted especially against the fear and the trembling and the troubles of the spirit as much as the body, for they cast it into the fire and let its smoke rise over the frightened and the sick, and they brewed it into a draught and gave it against the cold trembling and the fear, and they used it in the great festivals and the offerings to the rain powers, and it ran like the wild tobacco through both the medicine and the ritual of that people, a herb of the body and the spirit both. The strong aromatic oils of it are real and gentle, settling to the stomach, easing the cramp, and the sharp clean scent of its smoke, rising over a frightened sufferer, was a thing that marked the moment as sacred and as cared for, that settled and steadied the anxious spirit, and so the gold, flowered herb did its quiet double work, easing the body a little with its mild real virtue, and steadying the spirit with its sacred fragrant smoke, and the healers reached for it often, for the trembling and the fear and the cold and the troubled belly, and trusted it, and it had earned, in its modest way, a part of that trust. Let me tell you of the cure for the swollen neck, and the gathered gland, the hard lump risen under the jaw, or along the throat that came with certain fevers and certain slow sicknesses, against which the healers laid their drawing poultices, the warm moist masses of pounded herb and resin laid upon the swelling to soften it, and to draw it and to bring it, if it would come, to its head, and its bursting, and its draining, and its relief. And they gave the cooling and the cleansing herbs within, and they tended the swelling patiently, day upon day, and where the swelling was a simple, gathered one it often softened, and broke, and drained, and healed under the warm drawing poultice, and the patient tending, and the sufferer was eased, and where it was a deeper and a more stubborn thing the healer could do less, but tended it gently still, with the warm poultice and the kind hand, and eased at least the misery of it, which is a true thing to do even where the deeper trouble cannot be reached. Let me tell you of the cure for the film, and the clouding of the eye, the slow dimming that came especially to the old, the white veil drawn over the dark of the eye, against which the healers dropped their clearing juices and their cooling waters, the sharp, clean juices of certain plants dropped into the clouded eye in the hope of clearing the film, the cool, soothing waters to ease and to brighten. And here I must tell you honestly that they could do little, for the deep clouding of the eye is a thing of the eye's own substance that no dropped juice can clear, and the sufferers mostly dimmed on into their blindness, despite all the gentle droppings. And yet even here the healers did not turn away, but tended the dimming eye as best they could, dropped their cool, clearing waters, eased the soreness that came with it, and tended above all the person whose sight was failing, steadied them, kept them, did not abandon them to the dark. And that tending of the incurable, that staying with the one who cannot be cured, is among the oldest and the truest offices of the healer in any age, and the healers of the lake city kept it faithfully. Let me tell you of the snuffs and the inhalations for the head, for the healers, when the head was heavy and stuffed and aching, when the breath was thick and the senses dull, ground their sharp, clean, aromatic herbs and the strong, wild tobacco fine, and had the sufferer draw the powder up into the nose, or breathe the sharp vapors of the heated herbs, that the head might be roused and cleared, and the thick humours started and run off, and the sharp snuff brought on the sneezing, and the watering, and the clearing that does, in plain truth, ease a stuffed and a heavy head, and the breathing of the warm, aromatic vapours loosened the thick breath, and the sufferer, the head cleared, and the senses roused, felt the better for it. And this is sound enough, for we ourselves still clear a stuffed head with the sharp vapour and the warm steam, and the healers of the lake city had found the same gentle answer to the same small misery long before us. Let me tell you, while we are at the head, of the healing songs, for I have spoken of the prayers, the long, grave, formal spoken words, but there were songs too, the chants and the songs the healers sang over the sick, slow and rhythmic and old, sung low over the suffering person through the long nights of a hard sickness, and the singing, like the speaking of the prayers, like the slow sweeping with the green bundles, was a part of the cure, a true part, for the slow, low, rhythmic song sung over a sick and frightened person is a deeply soothing and a deeply gathering thing. It eases the racing heart and the frightened mind. It marks the night as held and tended. It carries the sufferer along on its slow rhythm toward rest and toward sleep, the way a mother's slow song carries a frightened child towards sleep, and the healers of the lake city sang their old slow healing songs over the sick through the long nights, and eased them, and gathered them, and bore them on the slow rhythm toward the rest in which the body does its own deep mending. And there is no truer medicine than that, the slow song over the sick in the night. And they had it, and they used it, and I think of it now, as the candle gutters low, as among the loveliest of all the things they did. And here, near the end, let me gather the whole of it into a single slow thought for you to rest upon. We have walked together this long night through the medicine of a great city on the water, a city now long gone, its temples thrown down, its canals filled in, its people scattered and changed, and yet, in their deepest blood and their oldest knowledge, never wholly lost, for the herbs they used grow still in that country, and are gathered still, and the steam baths are heated still, and the woman medicine is given still to the laboring woman, and the worm herb still flavors the bean pot and still drives out the worm, and the dark spiced chocolate is still drunk, and the great green plant still gives its sap and its fiber and its drink, and the long patient knowledge of the healers, broken and scattered and half lost as it was, runs on still quietly in the hands of the wise women and the old healers of that land, down to this very night. And we have seen, walking through it, the strange and the sensible lying always close together, the crushed jewel beside the cool plaster, the boiled tale of the night, creature beside the trained turning hand of the midwife, the cast maize beside the soap root wash, the calling home of the soul beside the Maguey sap that truly closed the wound. And we have seen, again and again, the quiet wonder of it, that the careful people of our own age, going back to test the old strange cures, find in them, far more often than chance could explain, a real and a measurable virtue found by nothing but the patient watching of intelligent people across a very long time, the sap against the wound, the herb against the worm, the medicine against the stalled birth, the laurel against the swelling, the charcoal against the poison, the marigold against the troubled belly, the binding root against the flux. They knew the body, those healers, about as well as anyone could know it in their age, and they tended it about as well, and where they could not cure they comforted, and where they could not comfort they stayed, and they never once forgot, those healers of the city on the water, that a person is a body and a frightened spirit woven together, and that to heal is to tend both. There is time yet, before the candle is wholly gone, for a last few of the cures, and these I have saved on purpose for the very end, for they are the gentlest, and they ask the least of you, and they may simply drift over you, now like the last warm air of a closing day. Let me tell you of the cure for the troubled sleep itself, for the people of the lake, city, like people everywhere and in every age, knew the misery of the sleepless night, the mind that would not quiet, the body that would not rest, and they had their gentle remedies for it, the calming herbs steeped into a warm draught and given at the close of the day, the warm bath to loosen the body before rest, the slow low song sung over the wakeful, the cleansing sweep with the green bundles to brush away the day's heaviness, and, above all, the warm steam of the bath house in the evening, from which a person came out so loosened and so emptied and so calm that sleep came down over them of its own accord. They understood, those healers, that sleep is not a thing that can be forced, but a thing that must be allowed. A thing that comes when the body is warmed and loosened, and the mind is quieted, and the day is set down. And so they did not fight the sleeplessness, but eased the way towards sleep, warmed the body, quieted the mind, sang the low song, brushed away the heaviness, and let the sleep come of itself, which is, I think, the wisest way to meet a sleepless night that anyone has ever found, and is very near to the way you yourself are being eased towards sleep this very night, by the low voice, and the slow words, and the warmth, and the setting down of the day. Let me tell you of the cure for the grief of the heart, for the people of the lake. City knew that grief is a true sickness, that the loss of a loved one, the death of a child, the long sorrow that bows a person down, can sicken the body as truly as any fever, can waste the flesh and steal the sleep and dim the eye. And they tended the grieving as they tended the sick, with the steam, bath and the calming herbs, and the long, grave, kind words, and the company of their people, with the funeral rites that gave the grief a shape and a passage, with the ceremonies that let the mourner weep and speak, and set down by slow degrees the unbearable weight, and this tending of the grieving. This taking of grief seriously as a sickness to be healed, and not merely a sorrow to be borne alone, was among the wisest of all their medicines, for grief untended does in truth sicken, and sometimes kill. And grief tended, given shape and passage and company and time, is born and survived and slowly healed. And the healers of the lake, city, who never forgot the spirit, never forgot the grieving, and stayed with them, and tended them, and bore them slowly through. Let me tell you of the cure for the fright of the child, for the small ones of the lake. City, like small ones everywhere, were easily frightened by the dark, by the storm, by the dog, by the dreadful thing half seen, and a badly frightened child could fall into the fright. Sickness we have spoken of, the wasting and the paleness and the broken sleep, the scattering of that warm, bright inner force that the people held to be most loosely settled in the young, and the healers had their gentle craft for it, the calling home of the child's scattered self, performed with special tenderness over the little ones, the soft coaxing words, the passing of the herb bundle over the small body, the laying of the hand, the speaking of the gentle blessing, the gathering home of the frightened little soul, and the settling of it back where it belonged. And a frightened wasting child so tended, taken up by a loving wise woman and gently and gravely told that the fright was over, that the scattered self was found and gathered and brought home, that all was well and would be well, was eased more often than not of its terror, and slept and ate and grew well again, the deep wisdom of it being that a frightened child is healed very much by being held and soothed, and told with full authority that it is safe. And the healers of the lake city knew this, and held the frightened children, and called their small souls home. And that is a thing worth resting on, as you yourself grow drowsy, that there were once wise, gentle women in a far city who knew how to gather a frightened child's scattered self and call it gently home. And let me tell you, while we are among the children, of the great care the people of the lake city took in the rearing of the young, the careful feeding, the gentle discipline, the long patient teaching, the protective rites and blessings, for they held that the health of the grown person began in the careful tending of the child. And they were, by all the accounts that have come down to us, a people who loved and tended their children with great care, who spoke to them long and gravely of how to live, who bathed them and blessed them, and watched over the settling of their souls. And this care, this long patient tending of the young, was itself a kind of medicine, the deepest and the slowest kind, the kind that does not cure a sickness already come, but quietly prevents 100 sicknesses from coming, by raising a child clean and fed and loved and steady. And the healers and the parents and the wise women of the lake city practiced it faithfully, and the people they raised were the stronger for it. And now I find, as the night draws toward its close, that I have given you very near to all of them the strange cures and the sensible cures, the cures of the body and the cures of the spirit, more than I had thought to count when we began, the bitter green fever, tea, and the dark cacao, and the purging root, and the crushed jewel plaster, and the cool flower water, and the green tobacco paste, the Maguey sap, and the obsidian blade, and the thorn needle, and the honey, and the salt, and the blood, herbs, and the bone splints, and the resin salves, the worm, herb, and the rousing chili, and the gentle gruel, and the binding root, and the charcoal, and the strengthening tonic, the nose, drops, and the numbing tobacco against the tooth, and the cool washes for the eye, the fragrant reviving flower, waters, and the sacred vision plants, and the reed dreams, the woman, medicine, and the steam, bath, and the turning hand, and the boiled tail of the night, creature, and the eagle stone, the soap, root washes, and the resinous salves, and the poultices, and the cooling clays, and the laurel salve, the cast maize, and the measured arm, and the calling home of the soul, and the copal smoke, and the green bundle sweeping, and the long grave prayers, and the cure by confession, the serpent, bite paste, and the gout paste, and the herbs for the stone, and the warm drops for the ear, and the milk herbs, and the burn salves, and the bath herbs, the gold flowered marigold, and the neck poultices, and the eye drops, and the head snuffs, and the healing songs, and the gentle easing towards sleep, and the tending of grief, and the calling home of the frightened child. And you have let them all wash over you, asking nothing of you, only listening, as the candle burned slowly down. And I think, holding all of them together in the mind at once, this last quiet thought, which I will leave with you as we turn at last toward sleep, that the medicine of the city on the water was, for all its strangeness, a deeply humane and a deeply intelligent thing, the long, patient work of generations of careful watchers, who tended the body and the spirit together, who comforted where they could not cure, and stayed where they could not comfort, who never abandoned the sick, or the dying, or the grieving, or the frightened, and who found, by nothing but patience and attention and kindness across a very long time, a great many true and gentle and genuinely effective remedies, and who held, at the center of all their healing, the warm steam of the bath and the kind hand and the grave slow word, which are, in the end, among the oldest and the truest medicines that any people anywhere has ever found, and which are, in their own quiet way, very near to the medicine that is being given to you yourself this night, the warmth and the quiet, and the low, slow voice, and the setting down of the day. Let us linger a little longer in that city, now, before we leave it for the night, for I have given you its cures, but I have not let you walk its quiet streets. And there is no hurry, and the lingering will be its own slow, gentle ending. Imagine, then, the morning in the city on the water, the early morning, before the heat, when the lake lies still and silver under a sky just turning from grey to pale gold, and the first canoes are slipping out from the island toward the market, laden with flowers and herbs and fish and maize, the paddles dipping softly, the water folding and unfolding behind them. The healer rises early in her low house with the courtyard of careful plants, and she steps out into the cool morning to walk among her rows, to see what has grown in the night, to pinch a leaf here and smell it, to gather what is ready, the dew still on it, into her basket, for the herbs are best gathered in the cool of the morning, and she has known this all her life, as her mother knew it and her mother's mother. She moves slowly among the rows, the grey-green wormwood and the gold-flowered marigold, and the strong wild tobacco, and the soap plants and the flowering vines. And she gathers, and she smells, and she remembers who is sick in the houses round about, and what they will need. Then she walks, if she needs more than her own rose can give, the short way to the great market, across the still, cool causeway or by canoe along the canal, and she comes into the vast, ordered marketplace as it fills with the morning, the rows upon rows of sellers settling behind their mats, the calling, the bargaining, the bright heaps of fruit and flour and grain, and she goes to the quarter of the medicine sellers, the women and the old men sitting behind their low mats of dried roots and folded barks and damp green herbs and coloured earths, and small dried animal bodies and polished stones, and she moves slowly down the row, choosing, smelling, breaking a leaf to test it, asking after this root and that, paying with her small handful of counted cacao beans, gathering into her basket what she will need for the sick of her parish, the binding root for the one with the flux, the woman, medicine for the one near her time, the worm, herb for the pale pot, bellied child, the bitter green for the one with the fever. And then she walks home again through the brightening, busying city, her basket full, to begin the day's tending. And the day's tending was long and various, and it took her through all the rooms of the body and the spirit that we have walked through tonight. She went to the house where the child lay feverish, and she felt its heat, and she gave the bitter green tea, and laid the cool cloth on its brow, and spoke a quiet word to the frightened mother. She went to the house where the man lay with a wound from a quarrel, and she cleaned it, and packed it with the Maguey sap, and bound it clean, and told him to keep it still. She went to the house where the old woman lay with the aching joints, and she heated the steam bath, and steamed her, and brushed her with the warm green bundles, and eased the stiffness for a while. She went, perhaps, to the house where a birth was beginning, and stayed, if she was a midwife, through the long hours, with her herbs and her hands, and her grave kind words, until the child was safely come. And in the evening she went, perhaps, to the house where someone lay sick in a way the herbs would not touch, the wasting and the paleness with no cause she could name. And there she would send for the diviner, or be the diviner herself, and cast the maze, and read the trouble, and begin the longer, deeper work of the spirit. It was a life, you see, much like the life of any healer in any age, a life of going from house to house, of tending the sick and the frightened and the dying and the newborn, of cleaning the wound and brewing the tea, and steaming the stiff and speaking the kind word, of being woken in the night and walking the dark street to the house where the trouble was, of staying with the suffering of comforting the families, of doing what could be done and staying through what could not, and it was a life held in great respect by the people of the lake city, for they knew the worth of their healers, knew what it was to have someone to send for when the fever came or the child would not come or the wound would not close, and they honored the healer and paid her in cacao beans and cloth and maize and the deeper currency of gratitude, and she went on, year upon year, tending her people until she grew old and trained a daughter or a niece or an apt young woman of the parish in the long art, passing on the knowledge of the herbs and the hands and the words as it had been passed to her, so that when she at last laid down her basket for the last time, the long patient knowledge did not die with her, but went on into younger hands, into the next generation of the watchers and the tenders of the city on the water. And it is worth our pausing here near the end on that passing down, for it is the secret of the whole thing, the secret of how a people with no written books of medicine, no laboratories, no schools as we would know them, came nevertheless to hold so vast and so accurate a knowledge of the herbs and their virtues. It was passed down, mouth to mouth and hand to hand, from healer to apprentice, across so many generations that no one could count them, and at every passing it was tested again, watched again, refined again, the remedies that worked kept, and the remedies that failed quietly let go, the knowledge of which herb for which trouble polished, and corrected and deepened by every healer who held it in turn, across hundreds and hundreds of years, until what came down to the healers of the lake city in their last whole morning was the distilled and tested and refined wisdom of an immense stretch of patient human watching. And it is no wonder, when you think of it that way, that so much of it should turn out to be true. For it was true, the way a path worn across a meadow is true, made by the feet of countless travelers, each finding the best way. The wrong ways grown over and forgotten, the right way deepened and kept. And then the strangers came, across the sea, with their horses and their steel, and their own old medicine of the four humours that I have spoken of in other nights, and the city on the water fell, and a great darkness came down over the people, and a great dying, for the strangers brought with them, without meaning to, the sicknesses of their own world, against which the people of the lake city had no defence at all, no long watching, no tested remedy, and these new sicknesses swept through the land and killed in numbers that the mind can scarcely hold. And the healers, for all their long patient knowledge, could do nothing against them, for they were sicknesses never seen before, against which no herb in all their store had ever been tried. It was the great sorrow of their medicine that it met at the last an enemy it had never had the chance to learn, and was overwhelmed, not for any failing of its own, but because there are some troubles that even the longest watching cannot prepare for, when they come all at once and from nowhere. And yet the knowledge did not wholly die, even then, for a few of the wise of that people, in the school by the lake, sat down and made the painted book of herbs that we have read from tonight, setting down before it could be lost some part of what their healers knew, and a patient friar gathered from the mouths of the surviving elders the great compendium that has preserved so much else. And the herbs went on growing, and the wise women went on gathering them, and using them and passing down what they could, in secret sometimes, in the old way, down through the long hard centuries, so that even now in that country, the old knowledge runs on, broken and scattered and changed, but never wholly lost, in the hands of the healers who gather the wild herbs still, and heat the steam, bath still, and give the woman medicine still to the laboring woman, and call the frightened child's soul gently home. The city on the water is gone. The medicine of the city on the water is not gone. It runs on, quietly, like an underground river, down to this very night. There are one or two more of the strange cures I find I cannot quite leave out, now that we are gathering up the last of the evening, and so let me set them gently before you, the very last of them, before the candle goes wholly down. Let me tell you of the cure for the swollen and the dropsied body, the body grown heavy and puffed with the water it could not move. The slow, sad swelling of the failing body that came to the old and the long sick, against which the healers reached for the herbs that moved the water, the same flushing roots and leaves they used against the stone, given to draw off the gathered water and to ease the swollen flesh. And joined to these the warm steam of the bath, house to bring on the sweat and draw the water out through the skin, and the gentle bindings to ease the heavy limbs. And these were sound as far as they went, for there are indeed herbs that gently quicken the body's letting go of its water, and the warm sweat of the bath does draw off a little of the gathered flood. And a person swollen and heavy and short of breath eased a little of the water, breathed a little easier, and rested a little better, though the deep cause, the failing of the body's slow machinery, was beyond the reach of any herb they had, as it was beyond the reach of any healer anywhere, until very near our own age. And yet they eased it where they could not cure it, and stayed with the swollen and the failing, and that, as we have said so many times tonight, is itself a true and a faithful kind of medicine. Let me tell you of the cure for the trembling and the falling sickness, the dreadful seizing that took a person without warning and threw them down and shook them, the sickness that frightened the people of every age, and that they everywhere wove about with strange beliefs, holding it to be the touch of a god, or a possession, or a punishment, and which the healers of the lake city met both with the herbs of the body and the rites of the spirit, with the calming and the strengthening draughts, with the steam bath, with the offerings and the prayers and the cleansing sweeps to drive out whatever had seized the sufferer. And here, in plain truth, they could do little against the seizing itself, which is a deep trouble of the body's own hidden workings, but they did not abandon the one who suffered it, did not cast them out, but tended them and steadied them, and gave the calming herbs, and spoke the grave kind words, and surrounded the frightening sickness with care and meaning, rather than with horror and abandonment. And that tending, that refusal to cast out the one whose sickness frightened them, was itself a deep and a humane medicine, and one that many a later and a prouder age has been slower to give than were the healers of the city on the water. Let me tell you of the cure for the bite and the sting of the small creatures, the scorpion and the spider and the stinging ant and the biting fly, all the small fierce things of that warm country, whose bites and stings were a constant small misery, and now and then a real danger, against which the healers reached for the cooling clays and the soothing saps and the numbing tobacco, laid upon the bite to ease the pain, and to cool the swelling, and to draw, as they believed, the poison out, and these eased the sting, for the cool clay does cool a hot, stung place, and the numbing tobacco does dull the pain of it, and the sufferer, the sting cooled and numbed and soothed, was eased of the small fierce misery of it, and where the sting was a dangerous one, the scorpion's sting that could sicken a child, the healers gave the bitter draughts within, and tended the sufferer closely through the danger, and a portion of those stung by the dangerous things lived who might, untended and unsoothed and unwatched, have done worse, and the healers kept the remedy, and used it again at the next sting. And let me tell you, the very last of them, of the cure that was no herb, and no salve, and no rite at all, but simply the presence of the healer in the night, for I have saved this for the end, because it is, in a way, the whole of everything I have been trying to tell you. When a person of the lake city lay very sick in the night, very low, frightened, in pain, near perhaps to death, the greatest medicine they could be given was not in any basket of herbs, but in the simple fact that someone came and stayed, the healer or the wise woman or the midwife, came through the dark street to the house of trouble and sat down by the sick person and stayed with them through the long hours of the night, watching, tending, speaking the low word, laying the cool cloth, giving the warm draught, calling the soul home, singing the slow song, simply being there, awake and attentive and unafraid, in the long frightening hours when the sick are most alone. And this, the staying, the not leaving the company through the dark, was perhaps the truest medicine the healers of the city on the water ever gave. And it is a medicine that costs nothing but the giving of oneself. And it is a medicine that has never once gone out of date, not in all the centuries since, and not tonight, for it is very near to what is being given to you this night, the company of a low voice through the dark hours, the not being left alone, the staying, until you are safely down into sleep. And there are two small things more. And then I promise you we will turn towards sleep in earnest, for these last two have been waiting quietly at the edge of the evening, and they deserve their moment before the candle goes. Let me tell you of the cooling drink for the great heat of the heart, the drink the painted book sets down for the person whose heart burns within them, by which the healers seem to have meant both the heat of a high fever and the burning of a troubled and an anguished spirit, for they did not always draw the line we draw between the heat of the body and the heat of the heart, and the drink was a cool one, made of the juices of cooling plants and the cool flower, waters and, in the richest version, a few grains of the ground precious stone we spoke of, all worked into a cool sweet draught, and given to the one whose heart burned, to cool and to settle, and to ease both the fever of the flesh and the fever of the spirit at once. There is a quiet wisdom hidden in that joining, in the cool draught given equally for the burning fever and the burning grief, for the two are not, in truth, so far apart as we like to think. And a person cooled and soothed and settled in the body is a person more easily cooled and soothed and settled in the spirit, and the healers, who treated the heart's heat and the body's heat with the same cool, kind draught, may have understood that better than we do. And let me tell you, the very last of all the cures, of the simple drink of clean, cool water, given to the fevered and the parched, for in all our talk of the strange and the rare, the crushed jewels and the sacred mushrooms, and the boiled tales of night, creatures, we must not forget the plainest cure of all, which the healers gave more than any other, and that is clean water, given freely to the fevered, and the dry and the wasting, to drink, and to drink, and to drink again, for they had seen, by their long watching, that the fevered who were made to drink fared better than the fevered who were let go dry. And this, the simplest thing of all, the cup of clean cool water held to the cracked lips of the fevered again and again through the long day and night, was among the truest and the most life-giving of all their medicines, for so very many of the sick of every age have died not of their sickness alone, but of the drying out that came with it, and the healer who simply made the fevered drink and drink and drink was saving lives by the plainest and the humblest of all means, and never knew how many, and never needed to, for the drinking was a kindness, and the kindness was enough, and that, I think, is the gentlest note to end upon, the cup of clean water held to the lips of the fevered, for it gathers up everything I have been trying to tell you tonight, that the deepest medicine is so often the simplest, the cool water, the warm steam, the kind hand, the low voice, the staying through the night, and that these are things that do not belong to any one city or any one age or any one people, but to all of us everywhere, in every time, and that they are being given to you, in their own quiet way, this very night, as you lie warm and held and easing slowly down towards sleep. There is, I find, one cure I had nearly forgotten, and it would be a shame to let it slip away unspoken, and so let me give it to you now softly, as a kind of last small gift before the dark. Let me tell you of the resin we have spoken of so many times, the pale gold copal, but tell you now of its use upon the body rather than in the air. For besides the burning of it as incense, the healers warmed it soft and laid it upon the body, upon the aching chest, upon the sore and swollen place, upon the wound, a warm, fragrant plaster of the soft gold resin that sealed and soothed and held back the spoiling, and that filled the sick room as it warmed with the same sweet, dry, sacred smell that rose from the temples at dusk, so that the very plaster on the chest of the sick child carried the scent of the offering to the gods, and the healing of the body and the reaching toward the sacred were, in that warm, fragrant plaster, made one thing, which is a small image of the whole of their medicine. The body and the spirit tended together, the cure and the prayer joined in a single warm gold resin, laid gently on the suffering flesh. And the resin did real good upon the wound and the sore, sealing it and holding back the rot, and the warmth of the plaster eased the aching chest, and the sweet scent of it settled the frightened spirit, all at once, all together, in the one soft fragrant thing, and the sick child, the warm gold plaster on its chest, the sweet sacred smell rising, the wise woman near, was eased in body and in spirit both, and breathed easier and slept. And with that, the slow gold scent of the warmed copal, rising one last time in the imagination, the warm plaster on the chest of the sleeping child, the wise woman sitting near in the low firelight, the whole quiet house at rest. We have come, at last, truly and fully, to the end of the cures, and there is nothing left now but to rest. So now the candle is very low, and the night is very deep, and there is nothing left for us to do but to gather up the warmth of all we have walked through, and to let it settle over us, and to turn slowly, and without any hurry at all, towards sleep. Let me draw it together for you one last time, gently, not as a list to be remembered, for there is nothing here you need to remember, but as a slow, warm, closing thought to drift upon. We have spent this long night in a great city on the water, a city of canals and temples in a high green valley, ringed with mountains, 2 of them crowned with snow, and we have sat, in our imagining, in the low house of a healer, among the careful rows of plants, and we have watched the long patient art of the healers of that people, the tissittle and the midwife and the bone setter and the diviner, as they tended the sick and the hurt and the frightened and the new born of their city. We have seen the fevers met with the bitter green tea, and the cool flower water, and the crushed jewel laid on the burning brow. We have seen the wounds of war closed with the sap of the great grey plant, and the dark glass blade, and the thorn, needle and the honey, and the salt. We have seen the troubles of the belly met with the worm, herb, and the rousing chili, and the gentle warm gruel. We have seen the aching head and the rotten tooth, and the sore eye eased with the numbing tobacco and the cool washes. We have seen the children come safely into the world in the hands of the honoured midwife, with her steam, bath and her woman, medicine and her turning hands and her grave kind words. We have seen the skin tended with the soap, roots and the salves and the cooling clays, and we have gone down, at the last, into the deepest and the quietest country of all, the country of the spirit, and seen the scattered soul called gently home, and the copal smoke rising, and the green bundles sweeping slow over the suffering body, and the long, lovely prayers spoken low over the sick, and the heavy hidden fault confessed at last and borne away, and the slow old healing songs sung through the long nights over the frightened and the dying, and the thread that ran through all of it, from the first bitter fever tea to the last slow healing song, was a kind of patient, attentive, unhurried kindness. The kindness of people who took the suffering of others seriously, who watched it carefully, who did what could be done, who comforted where they could not cure, who stayed where they could not comfort, and who never once forgot, those healers, that the person before them was not a body alone, but a body and a frightened spirit woven together, and that to heal is to tend them both. That is the deepest thing the medicine of the city on the water has to teach us, I think, across all the centuries and all the ocean that lie between us and them, that to be tended, truly tended, by someone patient and attentive and kind, who takes your trouble seriously and stays with you in it, is itself among the oldest and the truest of all medicines, and is a thing you do not need a great city or a painted book or a vast market of herbs to give, but only a quiet hour and a low voice and a willingness to stay. And in a way, you know, that is what tonight has been, a small such tending, given across the centuries and the dark, the low voice in the quiet hour, the slow words, the willingness to stay with you a while as the day sets and the night comes on, and now that the long walk is done, there is nothing left for it to ask of you, but that you let it set you down gently into rest. So let your attention come back, now, slowly from the city on the water, back across the centuries and the wide dark ocean, back to the room where you are lying, the room with its own quiet and its own soft dark, and feel the weight of yourself held by whatever holds you, the bed beneath you, the pillow under your head, the covers over you, the whole warm weight of your tired body given over now to the holding of the bed, asking nothing, doing nothing, only resting. Feel the small warmth where your body meets the bed, and let that warmth spread. Slowly, the way the warmth of the steam bath spread through the loosening limbs of the people of the lake, city, easing the stiffness, easing the holding, letting every part of you grow soft and heavy and warm. Let the shoulders go now, fully, the way they have been wanting to all day. Let them drop and soften and spread, and let the softening move down the arms, down to the hands, until the hands lie open and easy and warm, and let it move up, too, into the neck and into the jaw, until the jaw unclenches and the face goes soft, and the small muscles around the eyes let go, and the brow grows smooth and cool and easy. The way a fevered brow is eased by the cool, damp plaster, only there is no fever here, only the soft, cool ease of a day set down. And let the breath go slow now, all on its own, not forced, not counted, only allowed, the slow, easy breath of a body turning towards sleep, in and out, and in and out. Each breath a little slower than the last, a little softer, a little deeper, the way the breath of the people of the lake, city slowed as they crouched easy in the warm steam, as the worn traveller's breath slowed at the journey's end, as the frightened child's breath slowed when its soul was called home, and it was told that all was well. All is well, here, now. There is nothing to be done. There is nowhere to be. There is no trouble the night asks you to solve, no fever to break, no wound to close, no child to deliver, no soul to call home but your own. And your own soul is already home, already here, already held, already settling down into the deep, warm dark of rest. Let the day go now, the whole of it, all the small troubles, and the small tasks, and the things said, and the things left unsaid. Let them all go the way the people of the lake. City, let the day go with the rising copal smoke at dusk. Let them rise and drift and dissolve into the dark, for they are not yours to carry now, not in the night, not while you rest, and they will be there in the morning, smaller, easier, met by a rested mind, and the night asks none of them of you. The only thing the night asks of you is that you let it hold you, the way the warm steam held the people, the way the slow song held the sick, the way the bed is holding you now, and you have only to let it, only to grow soft and heavy and warm, and to let the slow breath carry you down. And if there is any small trouble in you tonight, any small ache of the body or the spirit, any worry that came with you into the dark, then let me do for you. Across the centuries, the smallest and the gentlest of the old cures, and let me simply name it, and take it seriously, and tell you that it is held now, that it is set down now, that it is gathered up, like the scattered soul, and brought home and laid to rest, and that you are tended, and you are held, and you are not alone in the dark, and that all of it, the whole long day, and the whole long week, and the whole long stretch of your tiredness, may be set down now, fully, into the deep warm holding of the night, and left there until morning. The candle in the low house by the lake has burned at last down to its socket, and the small flame gutters, and gives one last soft wave of light across the painted book and the careful rows of herbs, and goes gently out, and the house is dark and quiet and warm, and the city sleeps on its still water under the wheeling stars, and the healers sleep, and the sick sleep, ease, and the new children sleep in their mother's arms, and the whole great green valley lies quiet and dark, and at rest under the snow-crowned mountains. And there is nothing left awake in all of it, but the slow lapping of the lake against the stones, and that too is slowing and softening and growing still. Rest now. There is nothing more to do. Let the breath go slow, and the body go heavy, and the mind go quiet and dark, and let yourself drift down, gently, with no hurry at all, into the deep, warm dark of sleep, and sleep well, and sleep long, and sleep softly, all the night through, until the morning comes of its own accord, in its own good time, and finds you rested. Sleep now. Sleep well. Good night.